So we're back in, open
Oh, it's
session.
unplugged, we need to plug.
No, he
it.
did, but then you got it.
Oh, that
Okay.
reminded me.
So there was no action taken in closed session. Steve, would you like to lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as it was presented to us.
I will make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Community and staff recognition.
My favorite. Tonight's recognition is a public recognition for our student services staff. As the district is well aware, the changes that have happened in the community as a result of shelter in place and as a result of dealing with the coronavirus pandemic have been across the board, felt by children, felt by teenagers, felt by parents, felt by grandparents. And we have staff that works in the district under the umbrella of student services who have just done an outstanding job of helping parents and helping children during these very difficult times. So I wanted to point out the efforts of our two school district nurses, Miranda Aster and Anita Seringhouse. Miranda and Anita have gone above and beyond to respond to every single phone call and email from concerned parents and staff members who have a real fear about what the coronavirus means for their health and have been an advisor to the school district administration, have gone with us to our schools as we evaluate how to reopen our campuses, have opened up here for medication pickup. Many people don't know we have children, we have hundreds of children who take medicine every single day at school, not at home. They bring their medication to school because they trust us so much to help take care of their child's health. And our two school district nurses have extensive records and files on the medical history of every child in this district. And when they open up their office here and welcome parents in to come and retrieve their medication, the connection that they have with their families is really something else to see. And so tonight we recognize our two school district nurses for being the outstanding professionals that they are. Thank you.
I have a quick question before we move on that. Do you know how many autoimmune children we have in this school district?
No.
None. Or we don't?
I don't know. I'd have to ask.
That might be under the,
I know.
backup.
But, I mean, you wouldn't have to say their names. I was just wondering how many we have.
I'd have to check into that.
Okay.
Well, they bring a lot to our district and for our children, and that's what's most important.
Madam Clerk, is there any public comment on today's agenda?
No.
Being heard, we'll move on to the consent agenda. This item is not discussed, so I'll entertain a motion to approve it as stated.
Can I pull something, or should I have done that before?
You should have done that before.
Yeah.
Needed to be done before.
Okay. I'll just ask you about it later.
You learn next time.
Still learning.
Then I'll move to accept this agenda,
The consent
the
agenda.
consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Information items 12A. Report a local, the LCAP for 2020 and 2024.
All right.
Superintendent Joe.
Thank you, President Bernowski. Tonight's presentation is a focus on the process of the LCAP and the main focus areas for the LCAP. To take the school board through the process, starting here on page 100 of your packet. Holding LCAP community meetings, we started very early, as you all recall, way back in November, December, January, and February. When we met with our parents, it was crystal clear that our parents are very strongly in support of the district having more social emotional learning supports for our students and having stronger relationships between the school district and parents. Both of those themes came through very clearly. And then the third was a focus on academics. Our parents want the district to help children reach grade level standards and ultimately be prepared for their high school experience. In addition, all of our school faculty meetings in the months of December and January, February and March included discussions on the LCAP. Our district administration held multiple meetings with our site administrators to gauge their input on the LCAP. The district analyzed progress towards goals on all LCAP areas. And then we held analysis sessions with CSEA and HESTA members in April and May. So the first part of the process was to gather a bunch of ideas and then take those big ideas and meet with teachers and administrators and whittle them down. And now that it's come to the month of April and May, we've taken those very, very concentrated ideas and we've had a second round of meetings with leaders from HESTA and CSEA to give them even more opportunity to go deeper into the ideas that we have. That's what I want to take you through tonight. So this represents the work of hundreds of people over the course of almost a year. So I'm proud of it and I'm excited about what we see tonight. Key changes, page 101 to the LCAP. Increased classroom teacher positions. Again, that has been a focus for us in the district to have appropriate class sizes. That's similar to last year. Increased mental health services staff. We have talked about the importance of having counselors, having MSWs, having LCSWs, folks with masters in social work or licensed clinical social work licensures. Increased parental involvement, use of funding to support tutoring and funding for arts education in grades 3 through 8. Reductions include the elimination of multiple management and confidential positions, eliminated contracted services for professional development, the elimination of multiple teacher on special assignment positions,
We had 4 of those? Wow, I didn't think of that.
and the elimination of multiple instructional assistant FTE. That was a resolution we brought to the board last month.
So all of these things have already happened.
All of those things have already happened. So what we want to try to do with the LCAP is you want your LCAP to explain what you will do, not simply show how you spend money.
Mhm.
And so when your LCAP only explains how you spend money, then nobody goes to the LCAP to ensure that we're meeting our goals. So we're changing that with this new LCAP. And I want to take you through that. So the first is a district-wide reading intervention program, specifically Orton-Gillingham and Footsteps of Brilliance. So we have to do 2 things here. We have to get the best reading program, Orton-Gillingham, and we have to train all of our teachers, and we are doing that. So this district will have every single primary teacher trained in Orton-Gillingham by the end of this school year, because remember what we're doing our end of year review. They will all receive this training.
This is TK through 3rd grade?
This is, at some schools, they're taking it all the way up to 5th grade,
Oh,
It
really?
is.
Oh, wow.
but it's definitely TK through 3rd.
Which one?
Some of the smaller schools, so Calaveras, they have fewer students, so they were able to get them. Footsteps of Brilliance, I have some very exciting data to share with you. We had, from August until March, so the first 7 months of the school year, we had 40 million words read in the district, which is a lot of words. And we were proud of it, we were excited about it. And then when the coronavirus hit and we started to do distance learning, shelter in place, we took 4 or 5 different steps as a district to ramp up kids' usage on Footsteps of Brilliance. We made it a goal because we wanted to show what could happen if we made every child and their data matter to somebody at that school. So we had teachers calling families, we had secretaries calling families, we had principals calling families. If we saw that your child was not using the program, we picked up the phone and called you. And from March until today, the district has read 42 million words.
Gee, what?
So the first 7.5 months, 40 million words. The last 2.5 months, 42 million words.
They have more time to read.
They have more time to read.
They're doing it every day.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
They're doing it every day.
These are all the littles.
These are all of our littles. These are our-
You're creating a love of reading, which
They're
has been
excited
sorely missing.
But Diego, can we get a breakout on which students are bringing us those numbers? Because, again, I always get worried about, I know my kids, they'll be the ones that are skewing that or, whatever, but the migrant kids, because I've seen the reports, and you can see as a student logged in or not and how they are doing, because that's the whole problem with this is if we create a world of have and have nots. I mean,
Well, Charlie,
who's doing the reading?
the special ed, I'll tell you, for Charlie, it's highly motivating for a special ed kid. And I can see it be highly motivating for a migrant student. Because it's also phonics, it's letter recognition, number recognition, it's blending, rhyming, blending sounds. It's all kinds of different things. So and then there's, bells and whistles, hey, you got it, congratulations, and
Oh, yeah,
So-
I was on the steering committee for it, but the data of again, we have 6,000 kids. Are there 3,000 kids that are pushing that number way up, and are there 3,000 kids that are or not? So if we just get a report on that.
Yep.
I mean, it's automatic, nobody has to do any work.
Oh yeah, I'll provide you that report, but the answer is no. It is not 3,000 students pushing the number up. It is, I'll use my child, who is a TK at Latin Lane, and in my house, he does Footsteps of Brilliance 15 minutes every night. So he's been doing that since August. So he's at 176,000 words read, which I'm very proud of. He knows it makes his daddy happy when he does 15 minutes of footstepping, we call it. So at the same time, when we reviewed his class data at the beginning of March, it was not equivalent across the rest of the classes. So what do? You pick up the phone and you case manage with every single family. And what's happened across the board at all of our schools is the numbers of children logging in, because it will tell you their last interaction, has gone from exactly what you said the first 7 months, 50% of the kids doing all of the reading, to now it's close to 90%. So, another example, Sarah Vista School, up until March, as a school, they had 2.7 million words read, which is the lowest in the district. Since March, 6 million words read. Why? Because every single teacher started calling. And what we want to see, because what happens with Footsteps of Brilliance is the longer you do it, the older kids finish. They get through all of the reading and then they say, I've read every book, there aren't any more books for me to read. So it's normal to see your third grade data kind of taper off. Where you really want to see those high numbers is TK, Kinder, first and second. Last year we had a few classes with 1 million words read, district-wide. As an example, this year, Sunny Slope has 11 teachers with 1 million words read in their class. They have 2 teachers with 2 million words read.
Wow.
Iowa Hardin has 9 teachers with 1 million words read, 2 with 2 million.
Wow.
Lad Lane has 6 teachers with 1 million words read, and 1 with 2 million words read. So we're seeing the numbers just extrapolate all over the district. And again, what I'm asking the board to accept through this LCAP process is for us to do things as a district, not to simply do things one school, one school,
Yeah, no.
one school.
And that has been our problem.
So now we take something successful, something high quality, that has proven results, and we work the program.
That's right.
But on the instructional side, we take something that's been a huge gap for us, because one of the reasons Orton Gillingham is so respected is because it addresses dyslexia. It's one of the first ways to screen, to screen children with a potential need for dyslexia. When you put that in line with a program like Footsteps of Brilliance, now you've got the during the class time handled, and you've got the outside of class time. In addition, the district-wide implementation of Eureka Math. Carla's mentioned a couple of times her experience as a parent with Eureka Math. Think about yourself as the parent of a kinder. Your child is taking Eureka Math for the first time. It's a learning curve, it's difficult. But by the time that child hits 2nd grade and that philosophy of Eureka Math becomes embedded, it becomes so understood by that child and by all of our families. Because the way the curriculum develops, it repeats year after year. It gets a little bit more complicated, but the whole process remains the same. District-wide implementation of positive behavior intervention supports and Sanford Harmony social emotional learning curriculum. So 2 different programs there.
That's gonna be real important when these kids come back with masks and one classroom. It's,
Half the class there, their friends.
yeah, social distancing
But it's
for
even,
our
I
first
mean,
grader.
even not just at school, but even at home, with just trying to,
Agree.
manage. Because some parents are awesome and some parents are not.
Some parents are working.
So, and some parents are working, so it's trying to build structures and helping them cope with, the stresses of dealing with everything, and even for themselves, it's, okay, I need to calm down and not get upset, or, it's that type of stuff that we also have to kind of incorporate in all of this, and giving parents those tools to be able to parent at home and be the parent, be the teacher, be everything that these kids need us to be.
I noticed one of our teachers did a little of that in her comments to my child, said, don't get overwhelmed, take a deep breath, and she gave her some little tip, just kind of like, take a little time out. So that, yeah, I agree, these are gonna be so important, right,
That
throughout
in
this
place
time.
right from the beginning.
One of the things we know, children will miss that daily interaction with their friends, with their teacher. But by having so many of our programs be online and be accessible to every child, and for every household to have a Wi-Fi hotspot that needs one, and for every household to have a computer, we've now actually greatly increased the parents' knowledge of what their child is supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Almost always,
yeah.
for
Yes.
20 years as an
Yeah.
educator, I have wished that my child would take their curriculum home and show their parents, this is what I am doing.
Yeah.
But when you as a parent, when the child says, I left my book in my locker, I don't have the homework, the teacher didn't give me anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no problem there.
Oh, okay, Those are, well, now it's online.
Yeah.
I'm opening this with you. So what this is also about is about focusing all of our instruction so that we don't have 10 different instructional models. We have a district instructional model. Sanford Harmony is taught in every school in the district.
If you have, like I was saying earlier about the weekly post, the objective, this is the objective, this is what your child should be learning,
Right.
and it's posted on Monday. This is what's going to be, this is what I want them to learn this week.
Right.
Fall, and then by Friday, this is what, you know.
But I think what would be important too, because a lot of it is the learning curve for a parent, is being able to open some sessions up.
I learned a lot.
So that we can invite some of our parents, perhaps in the evening, just to be able to sit down, you know, still do the long, you know, the 6 feet, but it's to give all of our parents, even our migrant families that don't know still how to maneuver a lot of these things, and try to engage everyone as much as we can so that they're comfortable following along or doing what they need to do as much
I
as they
think that's
can
really
with the
important.
capacity. Because there are some parents that have no education.
Yeah.
And no, you know, they're very basic. And so how do we reach those parents that are in that group, you know, and give them the capacity to help their child at home? So for us, it would be, you know, not just teaching the child, but it's also teaching the parent.
I agree. It needs to happen.
And that's one way to get them more engaged with their students' schoolwork. I mean, it's not like we're pushing on them, they need the help now.
You know,
We
and
can't do it all.
because I think once we reinforce that and we're able to give them those tools, the parents that, you know, I think it'll become very popular for a lot of families that, you know, I just need to go get a brief lesson to know how to do this or how to access that, and, you know, give them kind of a calendar of when we'll be able to have those types of, you know, parent outreach sessions, workshops for them, so they can readily sign up, and whether it's on their phone or through a phone call or whatever it is that you establish, you know, for them to do. But I think would be definitely very positive, you know, for us and for them.
Once we have the structure in place and the message is communicated to all of our families, the training will begin.
Awesome.
So we discussed that before, the idea of asking employees to think of the parent outreach as a huge part of this, so that, because what we're missing right now is we're missing accountability. But as a lifelong teacher, when my students leave my class, they know what is expected of them before they step back into my class. So my homework completion was always in the high 90s. There's always one that tests you or two that test you. But as a teacher, our teachers are gonna see our kids next year. We cannot understate the value in that. Knowing that I'm gonna be back with Mrs. Martinez on Monday, oh, I better have it. Right now, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right now, it's, hey, I'll see you on the next phone call and I'll send you an email. It's just not, it's two different planets. So the other thing that we're looking at is a district-wide implementation of advancement via individual determination, or AVID, in our 2 middle schools. And that's a very important program to implement school-wide, because what AVID gives children is it gives them tools to succeed.
Right.
Every single child will benefit
That's awesome.
from AVID.
I'm glad, 'cause
It's
only,
organizational, it's all kinds of stuff.
only
So that
certain kids
means
get that one.
Math teachers, history teachers, science teachers, English teachers will
They all
all be
benefit.
trained in
Good,
AVID
good.
by the time school starts. So not in a year or 2 years, by the time school starts, we have that training set up.
That's good.
We discussed this earlier, but district-wide implementation of our rigorous independent study education. We believe that families will choose to remain on distance learning. Some because their children are thriving doing distance learning, they love it. Others because they have health concerns themselves, or they have health concerns about others, and they don't want to expose their children to returning to school campuses. And what this program will do is it will create a fair and equal and rigorous playing field for all students. And by putting this program in place, we explain to the community that if you choose to do distance learning next year, it will not be what it is this year. It will be rigorous. It will be required. There will be ways to document. There will be ways to grade student work. So we're excited about that because
How many teachers would you need for that?
we don't know.
Depends on how many students
How
sign
many
up.
opt out, I get it.
When we get parents submitting a survey to us, we plan to send it out June 8th to our families. We'll be prepared to show the school board that data at our next meeting.
Well, the reason why I was wondering is, I'm almost positive we're going to have some teachers that would prefer not to have student contact for their either their age
Right.
or whatever.
And we have
They would
actually,
be some of the first.
Yeah, he has a thing right
we
here.
have actually talked to the union about that.
Okay, all right.
Because what we wanna do is we wanna do right by our employees. So when we know that somebody has a severe medical concern, we want those employees to be able to participate in a program like RISE, because now their health is safeguarded. If we can make it happen.
Right.
We won't be able to for every single employee, but if we can, we're gonna try it.
And if a parent were to opt into that, just hypothetically, have you thought about like, are they able to like in a month or two say, you know what, I'm actually gonna, or is it like a semester commitment?
Yeah, so we think of it as a year-long commitment, because we know that when you try something new, there's bumps along the way. And we know that for a child to show progress, that it takes months for it to take place. And we think once families go through the application process, they'll understand what they're signing up for, and that they'll appreciate the process.
Dude, when do your or ours emergency powers end? Because are you gonna be able to keep people off campus if we need to keep them off campus? If you think that they have COVID-19, whatever?
They go all the way through the end of this school year, and we will bring a resolution to the board at the beginning of the next, well, actually at our last June meeting, to extend them until we return. And that basically covers us all the way through summer.
So let's say a child with their student or parent backing says, I'm not gonna wear a mask when I come to school.
Yeah.
And my child will not wear a mask when I come to school.
That's a good one.
The first consideration, Steve, is that currently there is a lot of interest in having everybody under the age of 12 not wear a mask because of the likelihood that the mask will actually spread germs as opposed to protect kids. So we're all wearing masks, and the masks are preventing my droplets from heading over, to any of you all. But I've been wearing this for several weeks. I'm somewhat getting used to it, but if I'm an 8-year-old and I do this, and I'm holding this and I sit it down over here, and then you walk by and touch mine, I just kind of negated the whole idea behind it. So when it comes to older students, like our 7th and 8th graders, I think what we want to do is we want to educate families about why the rule exists. And I think once we put a policy in place, we have to abide by the policy. If the policy is that you have to wear a face covering, you have to wear a face covering. That's the only way that the community will understand how we're safeguarding people's health. If we have an optional policy, families won't know what they're signing their children up for by sending them to school. But social distancing is also just a big part of that. The last thing I wanted to mention was, as a key change, is the implementation of a student study team process. So I've discussed this with the board numerous times, and I'll bring it up again here. We have an extremely high percentage of children with special needs in this district. And I want to share with you a piece of data that should alarm you and surprise you. One of our schools, namely Sunny Slope School has a little bit under 600 kids, there are about 580 kids at that school. Of the 580 kids at the school, almost 100 kids are currently receiving speech services. So that is approaching a 19% children with special needs percentage at that school.
Anywhere, ever.
It's
Is
an
that accurate?
unheard of percentage. It is, except that we have 2 other schools that are not far behind. So, in addition to that, in the last 2 years, because of the tremendous problems in the special ed department, the number of kids with an IEP has gone from the low 600s to the high 800s in the district. So we're currently sitting at 855 children with an IEP.
Wow.
When 3 years ago, we were in the low 625 kids or so. So I'm bringing this idea to the table because we have to have one SST process that is rigorous and that is tied to the other things on this list. We have to demand that our schools do interventions for kids using organ healing, using footsteps of brilliance, using Eureka Math, so that when a teacher and principal and parents sit down to talk about the child, we exhaust all of our avenues to help the child before we move on to an IEP. We give the child the opportunity to try multiple interventions to see what might help the child before we automatically move towards special education.
A more rigorous process to test for RSP
And unify
and use
across the district.
equity, that will look good. If you have one procedure, be hard to challenge.
It will. On page 103, I take you into the first goal.
May I make a statement
Of
on this? In regards to the SST part. One of our frustrations as middle school teachers is that we will get a child who had not been SST. I think if, with everything, we should always look that there's a silver lining. And one of the silver linings of having our qualified PE teachers is that this is an area where if we have a child that we can see who is struggling in the lower grades, because that's where this should take place. It shouldn't happen when they're in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
It's too late.
It needs to happen when they're younger.
Yeah.
But this is a focus that I would think that since we have the extra help, that this is where a focus where these extra teachers could come into play. And that we should be utilizing their talents to help in this process.
Right.
And this is a gift. This is definitely a gift.
That's right.
And I would like to see the district, kind of really focus on this as a gift, to help these children, to see what we can do. And if it's a learning disability, then that's what it is. But
Or
if it's
behavior.
not, then we can, get them on the right track.
Absolutely.
So I would like to see that as an emphasis.
Absolutely.
Because they haven't spoken enough.
Right, yeah,
Could be.
they just didn't get the extra TLC
Right.
they needed,
Right.
Is ADD considered, what is that considered?
So,
It's a learning disability.
the question Liz asked is about ADD. It's not always aligned to having a learning disability. It can sometimes fall into the category of connecting with a child's just physical experience at school. So you'll have children who are diagnosed ADD or ADHD, and they'll have what's called a 504, which is a different plan that will help address their sometimes physical, but sometimes academic needs. I would say that of our children who have a specific learning disability, a fairly high percentage of those children also have a diagnosis for ADHD. So it's kind of a sometimes yes, sometimes no situation.
Because from my own experience, having a son who has ADD and having several SST since kindergarten done and really not, you know, teachers didn't really know why my child couldn't retain and couldn't learn and couldn't, you know, was distracted by, you know, the fly flying around, you know, and it just, and I didn't know. I didn't have the knowledge of what, that even existed. And so it's just like anything, you know, with certain parents that don't have certain experiences or knowledge to certain things. Autism, I would have never, not having anyone in my family, would have known what some of those early signs were. And so when they do start school, and I think we really need to have good, strong SST team leaders that understand those different signs in children and can readily try to assess them, you know, with the parent and with their pediatrician or whoever it is they have to go to ensure that we're all working together to find, you know, what's, you know, what the child's concerns are in learning, and then be able to then start reinforcing and building, you know, those bridges for that student to, you know, be successful. But if, like Jan said, if we don't do it early, we've lost first grade,
Yeah.
second grade, where you're building their foundation in reading and in writing. My child didn't get that.
Right.
And so by third grade, he was 2 years behind. And I didn't know why. And, you know, again, every year we did SSTs with no
Result.
result.
And
So I want it to be effective, I want it to
And
be
not be
strong, you know, but we have to have good, strong, committed individuals that understand all the nuances of learning and where, you know, if it's this, if it's that, you know, so that we're
So
able
by the
to
time
help
you get to
support
us,
the parent
right.
in
And
looking
helping,
for whatever resources outside of school. To me, it was going to a specialist to get him properly diagnosed. And then, you know, then after that, you know, it was my determination how I felt I needed to support him, whether it was medication or however else. But that was on me, working with the 504 and working with, you know, but now we knew, we kind of had an idea of what needed to happen in school. But without that, you're kind of not really understanding what the child's true needs are.
agreed.
And speaking of someone that had to grow up through that and experience ADD, still have it. I'm just thankful nowadays that at least somebody knows. When I was growing up, there was one cure for the ADD, a stick. They hit you with a stick.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
That's the cure.
Yeah.
It didn't cure anything. It just made you feel bad that there's something wrong with you.
Right.
But it's something I had to live, well, all through school.
But that's how we lose kids. We give
That's
them,
it.
they disconnect.
If it wasn't for the
because
stick, you
they
would have lost
struggle
me.
so much.
You said
And they feel
sports,
so
right?
badly about themselves that they can't, you know, why is it that everybody else is learning and I can't get this?
And in the scenario you explained, and Steve, the scenario you gave, if we have one unified SST process that says these are the strategies you will put in place as a school, then the number of kids that fall through the cracks goes
Right.
way, way, way down. And it becomes, like you said, you start to have experts in SSTs who will lead those SSTs and guide all the co-workers through the SST process. And that's really what it's about. It's about our LCAP is not just an explanation of how we spend money. This isn't gonna cost us any money. Training the staff on,
Procedures.
it's doing things more effectively. It's
Yeah, but it's also,
changing what we do to be better.
if I could, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is exactly what Bill Barr said we needed to have. So we need to have procedures that are unified throughout the district. And this is exactly what we've needed, and thank you for.
And Jan, the reason I'm presenting to the board tonight as opposed to January of 2019 when I was hired is, if you come in as a new superintendent and you don't take the time to get to know a school district, nobody cares what you think. Because they say, he's got his own agenda, she's got her own agenda, he'll be in some other district, he'll be gone, he's only here for 2 years. And so what we've chosen to do is to say, let's get to know what we're doing, let's get really deep in understanding the Hollister School District. So that because I want you to understand, every single thing I've talked to you about tonight has gone through 2 separate cycles with our teachers and our classified. And the very comments you're making, Liz, about your child, our own employees are making the exact same comment you're making. When my child was in this district 7 years ago, I wish we had ... Well, now it's in place.
I would also say on the other hand, I wonder, and I hope that these experts that are gonna put these SSTs together are also cautious and aware to not over-label, right? I wonder about those numbers that are so high, like, are they truly special ed, or are they a mix of like what we were talking about, a child who just wasn't exposed and didn't have enough support, and so I hope that we're able in those SSTs to filter appropriately.
That's what a proper
Because I'm
SST
worried about the label
That's how a
that
proper
follow them
SST should work.
to the high school, right?
That's the whole point of an
Right.
SST.
Let me connect what you said with what Jan said a few minutes ago. She said, you get kids in 6th grade who haven't been through an SST.
Right.
So then you actually feel awful for the child because you know they can't learn what you're gonna try to teach them.
Right.
So, but at the same time, what you're saying is we might be over-identifying kids. So let me tell you why that happened, why both things are true. Both things are true because one of the main ways that a child qualifies for an IEP is to take one battery of tests that test their intellectual acumen, their ability to think. They're not subject area tests. They're process tests. They're memory tests. They're the kind of test any child could sit down and take a test to put shapes in order, to connect, pictures and that sort of thing. I'm getting a phone call here. This is very exciting.
What?
Let me take this here. This is our first time. That's great. All right. Press 1.
I know.
Hello. Hi, this is Mr. Ochoa. We're here at the school board meeting. Of course. Of course. Of course. Yep, so let Sure. So I have a phone call on the line here, and what we have is a question regarding, and I'll restate it for you. Let me know if I misstated at all. I mentioned myself, Mr. Ochoa mentioned that employees have been asked to participate and give feedback on the various strategies that are included here. But has it been mentioned to the board that we're also have on the agenda tonight the elimination of certain positions? And so those employees feedback might change in light of the elimination of some of those positions. Did I state that correctly for you? Okay, great. She said, I think that's fair. Thank you so much for the call. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So, I think those two things,
Question about the phone call.
yes,
From now on, are we able to know who the individual is or are those anonymous?
it
I'm
was
just
a
wondering.
concerned employee is
Okay.
how the person identified
Okay.
himself.
Oh, is that why we didn't hear it on speaker?
Yeah, it was concerned employee. I'll put it on speaker for the next one if the
Okay.
person identifies himself.
Okay,
And they could call back at any time during the meeting.
all right.
But I think those two pieces of information don't run together. So one thing is to hold meetings and have a process and to ask people for input.
Mhm.
And then the other, the reduction of positions, is something that is put on us by the very severe financial changes that are happening in the state and the major reductions in funding that we expect to formally take place on June 15th.
But if I could say something on that,
Sure.
they're gonna have Fridays off. Fridays that there's no students.
The student, yeah.
So Fridays, can they hold SSD? With, the parents Zooming, or can a parent come to school and the child, how are teachers supposed to have parent meetings like this? How do you see that happening next year?
We'll definitely strongly encourage or Google Meets and Zoom meetings, simply because it's the best way to safeguard the health of all the employees and all the students at school.
Convenient for people who work.
But you know how you gather the strengths, and I guess you could just do that all together okay,
Same process.
same process,
Exact same
okay, all right.
process.
So would you do that on Fridays, or?
Not necessarily. I think, with an SST, you always want it to be held at the time that makes the most sense for the family, and at the same time during the employee work day. So Fridays are definitely a possibility, but it
Right.
wouldn't necessarily always need to be on
Okay.
Friday. There are a couple of other things I wanted to
Sure.
touch on. In goal 1, we have, you'll notice, co-teaching for 6th grade math and 6th grade English. And I want to explain what that means. What that means is you have children who will take English with an English teacher and math with a math teacher, and because they have an IEP, there'll be a second teacher in a room helping that child and the other kids in the class learn math and English.
Let's push it.
What we've been doing for many years is we've been taking kids out of the regular class to give them a special ed English or a special ed math class. What that does is it takes the rigor from here and it brings it all to here.
So you're talking inclusion.
I'm talking inclusion. Inclusion for 6th grade, and then in the following year, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, district-wide.
Okay, question here.
Sure.
As someone who had inclusion in history classes, for scheduling, for whatever reason, they would put in 10, 12, as many as that in a class, together, with one aide, and I have 35.
But we're talking 2 teachers.
One teacher,
No, but with this concept, it would be 2 teachers in the classroom. Now,
okay,
Co-teacher.
yes,
Yeah, so,
okay, so not an aide, it would be one teacher,
2
two
certificated
teachers. Okay,
teachers.
all right, that's different.
and I think what you're talking about, Jan, is the district attempted to do this a couple of years ago, but I wanna distinguish what the district tried to do a few years
Okay,
ago
all
to
right,
what we're
so I
doing.
wanna make sure, yeah,
Yep, a couple of years ago, the changes were made without holding IEPs. So right off the bat, it was not appropriate to make those changes. We have gone in the other direction, we're meeting with families to talk about these changes.
okay,
The
good deal.
second thing is, scheduling was somewhat left until the last minute. We've already met with our special ed department to already program students in for next year in this way. So the average enrollment, Jan, is 30 in the class and 7 children with an IEP. So
Good.
The numbers make sense, and then it's the actual 2 teachers in that room. So it's all fitting together really nicely. And
No,
we
good.
chose 6th grade so that we could do it right. We chose not to go all 3 grades because we worried that it would get away from us and we wouldn't succeed.
So you're piloting.
Do the first year with 6th grade, and then by this time next year, it's 6th,
Good
7th,
deal.
8th grade.
I like that.
So are we still thinking of doing all of our campuses K-8?
Absolutely. And this is happening, so Sarah Vista, as an example, Lad Lane and Sunny Slope, they will all have students, when they receive their special ed service, they'll receive it in their regular class. So they won't pull them out of 6th grade to send them with an RSP teacher. The RSP teacher will go into their class, teach with them. And most importantly, all the teachers will receive training before the start of the school year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really
On
exciting,
recommend, yeah.
really exciting.
You know, part of the problem in the past with special ed teachers and push-ins like this is, let's say you have this child for history, okay? The teacher, the special ed teacher is not there. The push-in or whatever is an A. And usually there's 3 or 4 other special ed kids in there. Well, I have no idea, other than looking at the beginning of the year, what the problem is with it,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Or, what are you doing? How are you working with it? What do you do to help get things across? You don't have that input. With a push-in like this, and that's the way special ed was originally designed, my understanding, is the teacher would come to the classroom. And that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be.
And I want to just share something on my own background. I started in education 21 years ago at Cal State University San Marcos in the teacher credential program. 2 of my professors, Dr. Jackie Talvin and Dr. Rich Villa, authored a book with their experience in full inclusion. The state of Vermont was one of the first states in the country to have full inclusion, and they were pioneers in that state. That was 21 years ago.
Yeah.
This is not a new idea in
No.
any way.
No, it's not.
And they,
I thought it was the way it should have been right from the beginning.
and when you do it right, Steve,
It's
it's a
perfect.
huge success.
Yeah,
You get the job done. I think that's one of the ways special ed can be much more successful than it is right now.
It's giving them the support so that they remain a part of the class, they don't fall behind.
Yeah, and you're not making them over here, oh, you're not smart enough to be able to do regular language, you've got to be in this special class over here. That's very humiliating to kids like that.
The only thing from what I've seen at the high school is there definitely has to be some really clear guidance and expectation. And that coexistence within that, classroom of this is what I expect and not it just be one-sided on one teacher, doing all the work, it's a teamwork and co-teaching is just that,
That's
So
the
that
value of
expectation needs to be clear for those people that are gonna be living this day in and day out, that it's not gonna just be on that one teacher and the other one piggybacking and doing, whatever, but for this to be effective, this teamwork has to be a true teamwork.
right.
You have to give teachers time to work together as well,
Right.
which we've also built into the plan.
Yeah. That's very important.
Let me take you to page 104, goal 2. A couple of important initiatives here. The first is to have district-wide implementation again of positive behavior intervention supports and capturing kids' hearts. You'll see there that I continue to recommend that we add an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist, or MSW position. Increased counselor positions through grants and external providers. We believe that going into next year, we'll have a minimum of 5 new counselors in the district that will all be grant funded or provided by external entities. Myself and Kip have been working on that for months, so we're getting closer and closer to that reality. But we have to have a person in the district that coordinates that work. So while we make reductions in other areas, you have to devote funding to something like a position like that. Because when you have a position like that, you're able to get even more services to children. You can bring in interns who sometimes have internships as long as 2 years, 2 school years, that come in and work with your students and create a pressure release valve to the children that need support on campus. And then, of course, the district-wide social emotional curriculum. And then the last part is district-wide guidelines for dealing with trauma and bullying. This is something you have all talked to me about, is what does a school do if ... if a parent calls the school and says, this is happening to my child, what are the actual standard procedures that the school implements? It depends on the school. Who's the AP and who's the principal and who would the call come into? It's night and day. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna tighten that right up, organize it so that a school board member, a superintendent, a neighbor could say, this is what the district does when you call with this kind of a complaint. So that's again, it doesn't cost us money, but it's an important change in how we do things.
When do we discuss the SROs again?
We can
That would be
discuss
part of this, right?
We can discuss it now. As you know, we devote close to $200,000 a year in the SRO program. It would be a pretty big mistake for us not to think about the cost of that program in light of some of the other reductions we're making. We had a presentation from our school principal just a couple of months ago explaining the value in the program, but in the last month and a half, a lot of things have changed. So this board will need to think about that. And now would be a perfect time to talk about that.
Is, to the extent that they can't use their police powers that you wanted them to, wouldn't it make more sense to divert that money more to, and again, forgive me what these initials are, but counselors that have, they have other special powers that they can use to defuse.
I actually agree with Rob.
Oh, I do too.
Oh, wait a minute, that's the third time.
Third time
What
in
time
2
was
years,
it?
in a year and a half.
Of course, then again, I didn't agree that that was the last time. So, I mean, that's really unfair. But, no, especially with half the kids that we had before, things are operating the same way. I'd love to have that 200,000 to put somewhere else.
Well, I'd rather put the 200,000 into counselors because the children need it.
Yeah, they do.
Much more effective than police officers.
And they could offer virtual assistance as well.
I think kids are,
It's
kids are scared. I mean, parents are, we're all scared. What the heck? What are we talking about? This is, we are going through an historical event that is unprecedented. We got people pointing fingers at one country, other countries. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. And for us to sit here and pretend we don't know. And the children don't know. We can't give them definitive answers. And they're gonna need people to talk to. So I really, I have to concur with everybody here. I think
we're on a biannual contract with them, aren't we? So when is it up again?
Let me pull that information for you. I can bring it to our next meeting.
I think we need counseling.
I mean, I'm willing to listen to the presentation again, it's just never been intellectually satisfying to me.
I agree. It wasn't last time.
I mean, playing with kids and stuff like that, I get that, but a kid that hasn't had a hug from a teacher in 3 months to me, or lost the hug of a teacher.
Or their friends.
Yeah. Oh.
Thank you for
Priorities.
That human touch.
Page 105, we talked about this numerous times tonight, but on the docket for next school year is a huge goal for parent involvement. Pre-coronavirus, it would have looked a certain way, now it's totally different, but we're still gonna focus on strong parental involvement. Establishing monthly bilingual webinars pertaining to at-home learning. Every single school, every single school. Establishing monthly bilingual webinars pertaining to parent technology use. Exactly what you mentioned just a little while ago.
Yeah.
District-wide strategies to hold school site council meetings, to survey parents, to increase IEP involvement, and to increase, it's obstructed there on the bottom right-hand corner, but SST involvement. So it's basically all the things you have been talking about tonight. And the reason it's feeling like this is because our process has been very thoughtful in bringing all these ideas. So because you all are stakeholders here, because you all are the parents of students and have raised children of your own, you know what resonates out there. You have neighbors who talk to you, you have family members who talk to you. And so that's why our plan seems so logical and so straightforward, because we took the time to really gather all of that input. And I think if we hold true to these steps, I think we're gonna have a wonderful, wonderful response.
Especially, if you're building new processes or board policies. I know for a lot of people, board policy is something that they'll never really either see or understand or, understand what it means to them as a parent,
Okay.
And so for us to simplify and really just make it easy for them to understand. If my child is struggling, I know I can go to the office and say, fill out a form, because I would have the understanding, there's a process to get my child assessed if I felt my child needed it. I can initiate it, or if I knew the process was the teacher had to initiate it, have the conversation with the teacher. But we just have to give parents the tools and understanding to be able to know what is out there, what the process is, and how to access it.
And train. Another training, another workshop, another workshop.
Can we put conversations with the board? Is that in this one, or is that in another goal?
I can definitely add that. We set them all up, and
Right,
as we
right.
discussed at a previous meeting, we can reinstitute them. We already have the
That's what-
schedule.
That's what the district-wide
Engagement.
input was.
Yeah.
But call it like conversations with the board and.
What did we call them? We were gonna call
I
that
thought it was community meeting.
community.
Yeah. Whatever, but I wanna reach out so that they can talk to us too.
I kept getting a calendar reminder this week, Lad Lane Community Outreach. or something like that.
That's
You know,
the
what
big
is it, on
word,
one
yeah.
district website, I'm going,
I don't
what,
see it.
what was that, or,
It was our outreach.
Yeah.
All canceled.
We'll get back to it.
So just going back, and I know with LCAPs and readjusting for them to be then now completed and submitted for December, is it with the understanding that districts are now having to modify and cut back by the 10%? Is LCAP also affected by the state's?
Yeah, so
That's-
what they've done is, they said, by June, you have to adopt a budget. That hasn't gone away. But in previous years, you used to have to adopt an LCAP that was tied to that budget that showed how each action would help you achieve those goals.
Right.
That has been released for this 1 year. What we have to do next month is we have to submit a report that explains how we responded during coronavirus. That's a completely different expectation. What I feel we have here is we have the plan that will work for this district for the next 4 years. Because we've already gone through all of the process, and we should hold true to that. Because the things that we need to address that are in this plan, those things need to happen now. They shouldn't happen in January. If we try them in
Right.
January, will have wasted an entire school year. Because we won't have trained our staff, we won't have set the expectation at the beginning of the year. So we'll lose an academic year, and I
Yeah.
do not want to lose an academic year. We're lucky that we started when we did, so that we're sitting here. I mean,
We're good
this
shape.
is a very, very big goal. a lot of things to straighten out our process. And we're all sitting here saying, this makes sense. It is logical to have a district-wide strong SST process. It is logical to have inclusion for children with special needs. To have a reading program that helps children who have reading disabilities, that's logical. Footsteps of Brilliance district-wide, yeah, you know, so it's just all these things, social, emotional,
It's also very
curriculum, more counseling,
adaptable.
you know.
It's very adaptable over the 4 years.
Well, but I also like that if one child, you know, children move within Hollister. And so if they go from one school to another school, they're not gonna have something
It won't be
different.
so different.
Now, the policies will be the same, some we've needed for a long time.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yay.
Thank you, folks.
12B.
12B, considerations for reopening schools. Tonight's presentation will give the school board an opportunity to ask questions and to hear about the district's initial steps in opening up our school campuses come August 17th, 2020. So I'll direct you to page 109 in your packets so that I can walk you through the process that we used to arrive at this point. The first was to do an in-depth review of the Centers for Disease Control documents regarding guidance in April and May. So statewide and nationally, the Centers for Disease Control puts out guidance that then we as governmental institutions react to. We think about it, we review it, and that's the first step of this process. The second step was to participate in the webinars held by the California Department of Education and to respond to the guidance documents that state has given to the district. The third was to draft a school reopening plan that had enough ideas in it that people could actually respond to it, but not so many definitive decisions that people didn't have a stake in it. So the school board, along with our employee unions, have received a copy of the draft schools reopening plan. It's a lengthy document, a 15-page document. It basically pulls questions and guidance from CDC and the state of California, and it turns it into something that you can explain, something that a person can follow a table of contents and read the information they want. And then a week and a half ago, that plan was shared with San Benito County Public Health and the San Benito County Office of Education.
So do they get back to us on that, or?
The County Office of Education has, the Public Health Department has not. So the County Office of Education also gave the school district on Friday a thorough school reopening plan template. We're in the process of merging the two documents. I will say that our county superintendent has been really wonderful through this process, working with me. And I think with her support, we're gonna adopt a really strong plan for us next year. And then the last part was we established a schools reopening task force. The task force met last Friday for the first time to go line by line through that draft plan and to give, we had 7 certificated staff members. We had 3 of our executive board members from the California School Employees Association. And we had a school principal and 2 district office administrators on the call. And we went really deep. We went very, very deep into that process. We meet again this Friday and we meet again the following Friday. So I wanted the board to see how we brought together information from a broad perspective, developed something that we could sink our teeth into, and now we're going line by line, questioning exactly how it will work. Please.
On your task force, did you include any classified?
3.
From which departments?
Our president, who is a paraprofessional, our district technology specialist, and our district secretary support services. So at the present time, we have 3.
Are there any parents on this task force?
Many of the employees are
Or parents themselves?
Because for me, even the task force is having, well, you've got several, concepts that you want to be able to access, in the reopening, whether it's the logistics of, your custodial on the cleaning side, that our secretaries and other people wouldn't necessarily have the knowledge.
Agreed.
So you really, just in considering your classified and knowing which ones will be able to give you the feedback that you need to ensure that, you're gonna move with the strongest recommendations, coming out of the gate. There's gonna be tweaks for sure, but the custodial, I think, component, is gonna be tremendous. And I don't know, again, being flexible as we're going to need to be as classified and working with the needs that we need to provide, the district with, even including, with the cleanliness, does that include our maintenance and, so in looking at what does that look like for you and just making sure that, your recommendations are strong because you've got the ability to have those conversations prior to and knowing, okay, that's not gonna work. Okay, well, then let's just scratch it off now. Let's talk about things that will work.
Thank you for that. And that's a conversation I'll circle back around with CSEA.
Okay.
What, I'm going back here, this, when, this reopening plan, who gives us the final okay? And when will that be? Or you know?
Right, well, they're all local decisions. So the state of California will not require us to open in a certain way, nor will the Department of Education. But locally, we are expected to coordinate with our county office and our local public health officials. The guidance and the directives that they give regarding the reopening of the community, we're expected to follow those. So what's at issue here, and we'll talk much more about it as we go through the document, is what is the specific expectation for schools? If the specific expectation is at no point in time should there ever be a situation where one person is within 6 feet of another person, then that's a very, very restrictive set of guidelines. So if you think about our experience, we all eat at some point in the day. We have to go to a grocery store. There are times when you're less than 6 feet away from another person. There are a lot of times when you're paying, the person is a foot away from you. Okay?
There's restaurants open right now with,
When you order at a restaurant, there's a person standing 12 inches away from you, taking your order. Okay? When you're picking up food, there's a person handing it to you right in front of you.
Yeah.
So, but you're talking about experiences that happen in 5 minutes. You walk in, you get your groceries, you leave. School is a 7-hour-a-day. You're there, and not with 2 adults transacting business, with 15 children and 1 adult, and trying to teach and having 15 dynamic children. So right now we have this room set up. We're all maintaining our social distance. We're all adults. If I bring my 3 children in here, you're gonna see a lot of kids violating social distancing. So it just kind of, it requires us to think about how to reopen the schools in a way, but only if we get clear guidance. If it continues to be vague guidance, then we'll have to make a decision here.
Well, see, that's why I brought this up, because I'm thinking that they gave, let's say it's the health department that does it. They said, yes, this is a plan that we will accept.
Right.
any liability issues from that point on, hey, we just did what the health department told us to do.
That's another question, or liability.
Because I could see lawsuits coming here.
Well, that's the thing, so
And that's why I
even
was
with
hoping to have
that
a
piece,
little more
where does the
protection.
liability
Yeah, a little more
consultant
protection from some
for
of
the
the other.
district kind of chime in
Because-
as well?
If we make those decisions ourselves and
Right,
in a court of law liability wise,
Right.
they say, no, you screwed up,
mhm,
that can be very expensive.
mhm.
That's why I was just wondering whether we would,
Well,
it'd be nice to have a little piece of paper that said, yes, you're doing the right thing from like the health
Right.
department or.
Or we're not going overboard and making this huge expense for plexiglass or, you know, all these, things that we feel we need to have, you know, to keep the social distancing, you know, thing possible. So those are also huge expenses
Yeah,
that
well, Mary-
Yale has to take into consideration, how are we gonna make this happen?
kids would
And
have
at what cost to the district, in
Okay.
addition to, when you're trying to make cuts?
I don't think American kids would do that.
That's what confuses me. I mean, can you sit there with a straight face and say you were getting absolute guidance from the California
Anybody.
Department of Education
You
or, you know?
No.
Okay, that, because
None of
again,
us.
I'm still a
That's-
news junkie, I'm
that's
just going, I
concern
don't
for
see
me.
anything.
No, and I think what they're saying is, understand the science, understand the guidance, and make your informed decision. I mean, this community is a good example, as you said. We blocked off 7 streets so people could come out and eat out in the open.
Yeah.
In this community, that was a decision that was made that I think a lot of people say, that's wonderful. I get to be outside. My sense of health, my sense of normalcy is returning. Other communities would say, that's a risk we're not taking. In the community's perspective, there's still a choice, which is, I choose to go have dinner on San Benito Street. You might choose to do that, Elizabeth. I might choose not to do that and say, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
What we're responsible for doing is understanding the science and understanding the guidance and then making the decision that best meets the needs of students.
So I'm gonna give you an example that I was just made aware of last week. We have a student at the high school who was, found to be tested positive.
Mhm.
She's out working in the field right now with her parents. She had a premature child in the month of March, a preemie, who also got COVID, who's in Stanford. But this family, who's migrant and field workers, have no insurance, were reluctant to go get help. Were reluctant because they had the fever and whatnot, but they didn't know, you know, whether they had COVID or not. You know, some of our indigenous families that are going to not seek help, but yet be, you know, have it, is a concern because we're not really truly seeing the right numbers. I don't think people are still coming forward and presenting themselves as, you know, test me because I've got signs.
Right.
You know, they had fevers,
You
you know, and we as just in the, you know, from them being migrant, doing our wellness checks, encouraging the parents, go to the hospital, go get tested, you know, but they had not done so.
Right, they're afraid.
They need
And
to
they are
call,
afraid.
we have a testing place here.
But
Yeah,
see,
that's
these
the
are
government, Steve.
indigenous
Yeah,
families,
well,
though, Steve,
right.
that
That's the
are not, they're not,
They don't ask questions.
they're not seeing the news, they're not, they don't know the
It's
information
free.
that
I
most
don't know.
of these families
I think it's
Uh,
more, that's the government.
that are, and they're very reluctant to
Mhm.
come out and expose themselves to that, to us knowing they're here. And, you know, and there's several families that live in that home.
Okay.
So, you know,
Exposed.
again, and they have little ones, you know, that are some of our students, Hollister School District. And that's why this part, you know, of where It's scary.
You know what you're making me
It
think
is scary.
this is, in your task force, if maybe you could talk about what, or with public health, what can they offer us when school reopens as far as,
Our testing.
education? No, I'm more of the education piece.
Well, no, I'm
But, and,
serious.
and resource to
Yeah.
testing if you want, but what does it
Yeah.
mean? What should we look out for? You know, because some of it is education, right? Some of it is like, resource knowing, and just kind of like, it's okay. So can you bring that to the task force or to public health because that is a worry, right? Are we
Well-
getting to all of our families?
Because we were checking on her just to make sure how she was
This
doing.
is something that my daughter has talked about, is that, you know how kids come to school and they get the runny nose and the cough. Well, what is the district's responsibility here now that we have COVID? Are we gonna tell a parent, we gonna say, parents, don't bring your child to school if they got a runny nose
That's
or a
the
cough?
education, right? Like, what are we gonna do?
So, are we gonna say, sorry, they have to stay home?
Well,
But I work.
technically, yeah, they.
But you have to stay home, I mean, this is gonna be kinda, so how do we, what are we gonna do here? What is going to be our guideline, how are we gonna help our parents, or, what are we gonna do?
We're gonna take a look at page 112 and
Okay.
Page 112 starts by identifying the importance of establishing social distancing on all district campuses and facilities. There is a great amount of detail that goes into this particular action step. The social distancing will take place in school offices, it will take place in restrooms, it will take place in lunch areas, it will take place in classrooms, it will take place on the exterior of campus, on every part of the campus. So the same way you go up to a grocery store now and you see markings on the floor for people, reminding people about social distancing, you'll see that at all of our campuses. Establishing policies to limit the number of students and staff in all classrooms. We'll establish a policy that's based on the recommendation from the medical community. If the medical recommendation is a 6-foot social distance, we cannot bring all students back at the same time.
Right.
It is not possible. If it's reduced to 4 feet or less, we can. If it's at 6 feet, we cannot. So that difference is major. Establish policies to ensure social distancing in all other areas of the school. That includes recess, that includes play areas, that includes multi-purpose room, cafeterias, and then establish policies to require the use of face coverings, gloves, and protective gear. And I want to specify that what that's in reference to. Certain classrooms have children who have very, very severe needs that include toileting, that include feeding, that include changing, some very, very high-risk activities. So those employees will need to wear gloves. So whereas I, as an administrator, I might have one face covering that I use for the whole week and wash it and bring, those employees will have packs of disposable.
Provided?
That's provided by the district, that's much more similar to a medical environment. So I wanted to point that out.
Are we even considering the shields that I
We are,
covering?
we're looking
Or
at,
the shield that.
yeah, we're looking at the sort of,
headband.
the halo band with the face
Those are
covering,
The welder's mask.
Yes.
yeah, and what that does is these protect you from my droplets, but if you aren't wearing one, I don't have any protection here, and this is a major way to transmit germs. So the face coverings, the face shields, they really
They work.
serve that purpose. And you can actually wear both. It's recommended that if you wear the face covering
Right.
with the face shield, you're protecting them twice. You're protecting yourself in the event that they.
My only suggestion for that one is actually talking to some of the aides who are in those areas to see if it's gonna work for them, because some of the kids, you know, the ones that scratch, the ones that are more aggressive may just get torn off their face.
Yeah.
So what would work for them, you know, in that environment would be ideal, just so that we're not, you know, spending things that aren't, and then we find out, oh, this isn't even gonna work, cause it's not gonna last on their face.
I think we wanna give them options.
Mhm.
I don't think we wanna buy one for every, but I think we want them to have the opportunity to have options. I will say, we're bringing in our paraprofessionals that work in these severe classrooms in 2 weeks, so we can start to walk through the whole experience of coming back. Again, we're trying to be ahead of the curve, so we're not gonna wait until August, we're gonna bring them all back.
Cause we don't want them to have anxiety all through the
Exactly.
summer.
I want them
What am I
in their
putting my-
classroom
Yeah.
figuring out, how would I do this, and
Exactly.
Yeah,
it won't be perfect in a mod severe classroom, but it has to be better than what we were doing before. We have to think about how to rearrange furniture in such a way, to create walkways that didn't exist before, to create space in the class that wasn't there before. And then you mentioned earlier the importance of having a custodial or maintenance representative. I did want to say the task force made it through goals 1 and 2. Our next meeting this Friday starts at goal 3, which is page 113, which is student and staff health policies and procedures, and it specifically goes to all the cleaning practice. So we haven't had that conversation yet, so we're in good shape.
Okay.
Action number 7 is to require daily health assessments. What that means is, we're right now on the fence. Do we ask parents to take their child's temperature every morning before school? Or do we attempt to do it at school?
Boy, that's a lot of work.
If we attempt to do it at school, some of these schools will be trying to take the temperature of
all day
500
long,
kids.
Yeah.
Do the math on how long that will take,
Oh, no.
and where will the kids stand? And after you take it, where do they go? Who's watching? So I'm somewhat kind of leaning a little bit to the side of it's a combination. So some families, the families will tell you, I'm not home in the morning when my child gets to school.
Oh,
You're right.
So we will take the temperature of those children. The children whose parents are dropping them off in the morning, they can take the temperature at home. Will it work every single time? Will every single parent do it every single day? We hope so.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, we train our teachers and our staff to recognize symptoms related to coronavirus so that we can identify students, send them to the health clerk office, have the temperature taken there.
Now I get back to my test kit.
Yes.
To me, this is a perfect thing right here. Let's say the kid does come to school with a runny nose,
Yes.
but he doesn't have COVID. Oh, well, you can't come back for 14 days or whatever the.
What if you have allergies like me?
Exactly.
And I'm always runny nose.
I mean, it would be nice, I mean, I'm really thinking about the students now.
Right.
To have something that doesn't make them miss,
well, you
was
can
it,
have a cough because you have allergies.
Yes.
well, the whole thing.
Can.
Are we going to make those people miss 14 days because we think they might have COVID? Or, you see what I'm saying?
I do, and our policies will prevent that from happening, but they'll be predicated on the family taking action. So if we know what the symptoms are for COVID and your child is displaying 2 symptoms, then we need you to go in to see the doctor so that you can get ruled out. When you produce a negative test result, you're back in school.
Yeah.
So we'll adopt policies like that. Our cleaning procedures are a little bit a different ballgame because what it pertains to is it pertains to having enough staff on site during the day to clean in the way that we need to be cleaning. And right now, what we have is we have 1 morning custodian and 2 evening custodians, and we need to switch that over. We need to move all custodians to daytime positions so that we have appropriate coverage, because these folks need to take lunch breaks as well.
Could we stagger?
Yes.
So I was thinking, if you have, yes, 6:30, and maybe a 2-hour gap between each
9
one.
o'clock, 11 o'clock. is
Yeah.
okay.
And that way, you've got the manpower, but you've got somebody late for anybody that's still working late, you know, that leaves the office at 5 or whatever. So just kind of coordinating, but staggering it so that they're not there by themselves till 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, because, you know, most of the heavy cleaning and knowing if you're gonna cycle things through. But again, you know, once you incorporate some of your custodians, elementary and a junior high, you know, because it's different, even at those different level sites, you know, custodial needs are gonna vary, but still, you know, I think on your task force to this process, you'll really get to really pinpoint what can be done and what can't get done. And prioritizing and making sure that it's very crystal clear what your expectations are for them, because things gotta change. And they gotta know from the very beginning, everyone, you know, and whether you're on like duty or not, I mean, it's a whole different conversation, but the expectation is we need everybody pulling their weight.
Exactly.
Question on the same lines, but a little different. Do you also have, the receptionists, the people who are at the front of the school on the task force too, at least one rep, to kind of give input, because I wonder what they think about being the first welcoming everybody, you know, and the desk and the pens,
Yeah, you need Esther there.
you know,
But to you, that to me is easier because you could put
but I'm just thinking like
some of the
this,
plexiglass on the
Esther's
counters.
been doing it
but I
for
think
30
leave it to
years,
the
you need
people
Esther there.
who know, right? Leave it to the people who know that job
that's
and
Esther.
and maybe they have ideas that we haven't thought of. I don't know, so yes, is there? or
We
can-
have a secretary support services, but not an office manager, but we can arrange that. But I also just wanted to hear action step number 11 is to establish a COVID-19 visitor policy.
Ooh,
So
that's gonna impact us big time.
the school that will be most impacted by that is Galvin Hills HDLA because of the extraordinarily high number of families that volunteer as a part of the agreement with the school. And just out of their own interest in their child's education. But the current guidance is to restrict all visits, is to not permit anybody to be on campus. They're not our employees, so we can't direct them to do this or that. They're not, you know, when you have an employer-employee relationship, you can tell that person, this is what you are to do, this is when somebody's volunteering, it's very difficult to keep that in the same accountability. So,
Unless you have a visitor's policy. Then you can.
and our visitor policy will basically be very restrictive for reasons having to do with the health and safety of children.
Right.
And then, of course, on-campus quarantine procedures. So when we determine that a child has the symptoms for coronavirus and is running a temperature, at each school we'll establish a room that is our on-campus quarantine location. At that point in time, we'll restrict access to that room other than for the health clerk and the child until the parent is able to come pick the child up. Sometimes that can be all day long.
You're talking student, and I see the top, it said student and staff,
Yeah.
so.
It's the same for staff. Staff, it's just slightly different because almost always the staff can transport themselves home or to a hospital. But in the event that the staff isn't able to transport themselves, they would also need to be in that quarantine location.
So, but the policy that you're gonna introduce for that specific staff members, are they gonna be expected to take their temperature once they come on to campus?
Yes.
And that be recorded somehow and, you know, and tracked to make sure?
Our current policy the current draft policy is to have all students and all staff have a daily health assessment, checking their own temperature every day.
Yeah. This is my question. Okay, so, little Frankie, very quiet child, doesn't say anything and comes home and he's Mom, he's got a temperature, she takes him to the doctor, boom, he tests positive. But didn't say anything to anybody, and he slipped through the cracks. Okay, so mom calls school, and he sat there all day, and, okay, he's positive and has exposed the classroom. So now what happens?
Well, the same process that we would use for any, if somebody in this room had it, we would all need to get ourselves tested.
Right,
We would notify every child in that classroom that they are to go and get tested because they have been exposed to the coronavirus.
And anybody else in the classroom.
And the teacher as well.
right,
So what you just described is the scenario every district is thinking about.
right,
So think about why it's now important to not allow all the kids to go play with each other at recess. Because now I don't know who you came in contact
right,
with. If we create a different recess schedule where the 14 kids in class all are outside together, well then there's 14 children who you have as a cohort. The minute you start moving children around,
you increase
now
contact.
have 50, 60, 80, 100, more than that children that need to go back and contact trace. So we want to try to really bring that number down. It's again another example of how school will be different next year than it was last year.
Right,
But the fundamental communication that you talked about of the parent going to the doctor and then picking up the phone and calling us, that's essential.
right, but so now, here's where I wanna ask further, so is that whole class then quarantined from school for 14 days?
One of the possibilities is that class would be required to go and be tested and potentially not return for that amount of time. So
But would they be distance learning?
It
So
would
then
be-
that's my second
it would be
question.
distance learning, so they would not be, but again, if you have children that are ill, then you're not going to require them to do distance learning because they're ill, they're at home and they're sick.
Yeah.
So it really just
Because we
depends on the
wouldn't
case.
know
by
if
case.
that child just got home and started with a fever and tested positive.
We
We
won't
wouldn't
know.
necessarily know if I went and got tested, that it would come out positive right
We're
away.
not gonna know for
Right,
a couple days.
Till I become
That's why you're
systematic and it
quarantined.
actually
That's what
hits
you
my
do.
It
system.
takes at least 3
It wouldn't
days to
come out
get the
positive.
result, at least 3 days.
okay, well, I'm bringing this up for another reason. So is there gonna be a class set of Chromebooks? And then Chromebooks that are at home? So that if a class, they have to go and be quarantined, they can go home and do work while they're still well.
Right, what if they're not sick?
That's what I mean, they can still do their work. And then the other kids that are in the other half of the class can come in after the classroom's clean and still work.
Every single child will have a Chromebook that's of their own
That
family
stays at home.
or provided by the district, and we will ask them to bring their devices to school.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking is, I guess it's too much money, but I was hoping that we would be able to have a class set for two reasons. That we would have a class set at school, and then one that stays at home for the kids that need it, so that it can't be dropped
I
and,
didn't realize what you just said, I'm still, so if like mine has her own computer, she's gonna take it to
We-
school now?
We want you to be able to have her bring it to school. So it's a policy, it's a policy that's in place in a lot of other districts. I'm gonna recommend to the school board that we approve, they call it the BYOD or bring your own device policy.
oh, I don't want Charlie bringing my iPad.
And he won't have to, but we'll ask families to do so, acknowledging the very substantial cost of giving every child a Chromebook. If we had to give every child a Chromebook, we absolutely could do that, we have enough Chromebooks to do that. But if you have families that have Chromebooks for their child, and the child wants to bring their own device, we wanna allow them to do that. So it'll be somewhere in between a family saying, I don't want my iPad going to school, and another family saying, yeah, that's fine, take your Chromebook, you take it everywhere.
Yeah,
having a class set, there's a couple of different issues there, Jen. One is
It
the
had to be cleaned in
the
between
constant
the two,
need to
yeah.
clean,
Yeah.
and you don't wanna have any community supply.
Right. Gotcha on that one.
So the individual,
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
That's
So
why
did you
they
find
bought
out
the
who
pencil.
could buy it?
It's yours, you don't give it back
Rate?
to me.
because we have, enough devices at this point in time, Jen, we haven't put another order in. We did, prior to you suggesting that,
Right.
already make an order for 500 devices, and those devices are in, and they're just being prepared to deploy, in August.
Okay.
But as it stands, every child that needs a device will have a device.
See, those are those things that I go back to again, as I'm a parent, you know, and I'm thinking, what am I responsible for this coming school year?
Mhm.
Temperature, computer, blah, blah, blah. And then what are you district responsible back? Like, as soon as you hear somebody got tested positive, I better get like, I want email, phone call, text. I want you to tell me, you know, and so I can prepare.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's gonna be good for us to get like some kind of orientation, whether, it doesn't have to be complicated, but just, here's what it is.
Yeah, I think the principals are gonna need to, have some kind of, or
That would be a good idea.
we do some kind of thing before school.
Yes.
With the parents.
Even on virtual.
Yeah, but we're gonna have to do something. The parents are gonna need to know this stuff.
But if you're saying we have enough Chromebooks right now, one per student, then if that were to happen, as far as the student, and not having access to the Chromebook at home, at least labeling so that Chromebook stays with that student a year. This is my Chromebook, nobody else is gonna touch it, it's gonna be just mine. So whether I need it at school, or if I get sick, I need to take it home with me, but it's still given to them for the year, and, regardless of the health situation and whether it's school or at home. Thank you. Could that happen?
And actually, we already have close to 3,000 computers in children's households right now.
Right.
So we actually don't have to deploy them, they're already out there.
Right.
So families will get a message from us saying, you're keeping your Chromebook all next year.
That's, I think, ideal.
So what we're doing is we're taking the Chromebooks back from the 8th graders, and
Right.
we're deploying to all of the new enrollees, and then all of our TKs and Ks, the new students will have a new device deployed to them.
Yeah.
So the big work of getting the devices up, it's already taken care of.
Yeah.
We're
You did the
85%
hard work
there.
So they're not turning them in this school year, they're keeping them.
Unless there's
Unless
something
they're
wrong with them that they need.
Yeah, they need to
Yeah,
get their
I
moving
didn't-
or,
yeah.
But even a child that goes from Calaveras to Rancho San Justo, they're not gonna
Yeah,
turn
there
it in and
should
get
be-
it,
Yeah.
it's our
It's just
device,
all of
it's,
them.
so we took the job and went from, 300 hours of work down to 20 hours.
Perfect.
Oh my gosh.
Let's go to page 114, everybody.
Sorry.
High quality classroom instruction. I think our parents need to know that when we're back in school, their children are gonna have high quality teaching. And that high quality teaching is based on having the appropriate number of English minutes, math minutes, ELD minutes. It's based on having equitable access to the internet. And it's based on the district-wide professional development plan. So as you know, starting next week, our teachers will be in trainings. Those trainings are not voluntary. Those trainings are not dependent on a person working at school A or school B. They are across the district, they are across the board. So we really put a plan in place to say the things we're doing are district-wide, and they're, more importantly, they're very high quality. They are the best trainings that we could be providing. So I wanted to share that with the board as an important step in reassuring our parents that when the children come back to school and they're physically in our classrooms, we'll have a very good plan of how to use that time with them. Which takes us to page 115.
Are we paying anybody to come back to, or giving them time to break down their classrooms?
It's already included in their contract year. And many teachers have already broken down their classrooms. Many teachers have already put children's belongings in classrooms, and put them, and schedule times for parents to come and pick up supplies and materials. So we're about 65% of the way there. Yeah. PE is a little bit different because it's not a regular classroom setting, but we're working through that program for PE. Mays had pickup last Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then Rancho is coming up as well.
Okay.
On the distance learning plan, what we have is, again, a district-wide learning schedule for all students. I want to make sure that the board and the community understand next year the plan is absolutely to grade student work. It's absolutely to set up an accountability system for the educational program we have in place. Because what we don't want to happen is to have another semester of no accountability. We know we need to fix that part of the process. Establishing district-wide schedules for art and PE, industrial arts and music, reading, writing, math, history, and science, all of our subjects, and then a district-wide at-home learning schedule and activities for social emotional learning. And then that takes us to page 116. Which is our standard operating procedures. It's very important, aside from having these plans with goals and ideas and a lot of language, it's also very important to have standard operating procedures that you can turn into posters that explain to everybody how we operate. So you will see posters next year that indicate upon arrival, we wash our hands, boys and girls.
Where?
We're in the process of purchasing some hand washing stations.
Okay.
That will be on the exterior of campus, not inside the restrooms. That will be foot operated, so we don't have kids doing this. That will have touchless soap dispensers and require every child entering campus to wash their hands for 20 seconds. So that we start the day ready to go, clean, with a very follow-through process for every child.
And how do they dry their hands?
The same pull down where, a lot of our bathrooms already have them, so it's just a matter of purchasing the outdoor. So you just pull it down and it's a single use and throw it. So you are touching it, but when you remove it, you haven't touched the next one, essentially.
Okay, so they're not gonna be dryers, they're gonna be.
They're not gonna be dryers, and they're not gonna be the type that you have to wheel or turn with your hand. They're the type that automatically dispense. So I wanted to share this with you all because I want to reassure the board that the many things we've talked about will be made easy to understand, so that when the public enters our campuses, when our children enter our campus, they know what they are supposed to do. So it's all put together as a visual process. Our facilities director and our student services director have been purchasing sample posters and sample visuals. Myself and the director of facilities and our senior maintenance staff, Abel, we visited Sarah Vista last week to test out a lot of those signs and where we would mount them and how they would look and what colors they are. This week we're going to Rancho San Justo, Lad Lane, and Calaveras to continue to test out those posters because we believe that if we do a good job of visually representing to children what they're supposed to do, the likelihood that they'll remain socially distanced will greatly increase. So that it's a constant reminder on campus of how I'm supposed to behave in these different settings. Yeah. We will have I'll recommend to the board that we have a special meeting in a couple of weeks to go further into the details. At our next special meeting, I'll have actual samples of these directives and steps to take with each one of these ideas, so we can go much more into detail when we meet in a couple of weeks.
What about in each classroom? Are we going to have some type of sanitation or hand sanitation in every classroom, or is that?
We'll definitely have hand sanitizing gel, the 60% alcohol-based gel, but we won't have hand washing stations in each
No,
classroom.
that part I get, but some type of way of, because obviously, once in the morning may not be enough, it probably won't be.
That's right.
They'd have to have other times during the day.
That's right.
It just seems almost impossible.
Pretty tough,
Yeah.
pretty tough.
It's definitely a huge task, but I think we're gonna do it. I think the number of people that we've already brought to the table to start working through this stuff, it's exciting. I like puzzles, I like strategy, I like 10 different ways to think about doing things. And you really do have some amazing people that work for this district. I mentioned Abel a few minutes ago, but his whole team, they're just the best. Our principals are amazing, our teachers are really.
I think the one group that we haven't brought to the table that counts the most are the parents. And we need to get them to the table.
And I'm glad you said that, Jen, and I agree with you, but I wanna make it a fair process for all of the parents.
Absolutely.
We have to start to build a plan.
Right, oh no, I
And then-
understand that, but I think that they need to know, cause there was a thread, last week, and somebody got off on a tangent, and I mean, it was just crazy talk. And, you know, and they need to know that, we are doing everything in our power to make sure that their child is protected.
The number one complaint I hear from educators, from all the teachers and people like teachers is they never know. It's like, and I'm not talking about just us, I'm talking about in general, where the teachers, the educators, they don't know what the plan is. What I like about what you're doing here, I may not like a lot of what I'm seeing because it's just such a shock, but no one is going to deny we don't have a plan for, I mean, you've thought about everything.
Yeah, even the computer, I was like, what is he on the computer?
So and if you combine that with your other presentation on district-wide, so that somebody at Lad Lane isn't being told something different than at Arnold Harding, different than Rancho and me, so I'm in disbelief, I can't wait to look at what all this is going to cost, but again, the one thing is, no parent is gonna say, well, I don't understand what the plan is, as long as we end up publishing whatever it is,
Oh, yeah.
And we're just weeks away from doing that. We're only weeks away from doing that. This week, we have a survey going out to our teachers to ask them about their feedback. So even though we have this reopening task force, we're really gonna involve all the teachers in the
That's
unit.
great.
We have a survey going out to all our classifieds this week. Next week will be the survey we send to all the parents.
Great.
A little bit more tilted to, as a parent, how do you perceive these things, as opposed to as a staff member, more in your position, how does this affect you type of questions. And we'll be back here in just a couple of weeks going through the process again.
And I think also there should be something about responsibility, individual and family responsibilities, about for staff and on parents that if you're not feeling well, then you better take that day, and you know, that kind of stuff, the individual responsibility that comes with this pandemic.
What it's really gonna come down to is how well the kids accept this.
Right.
I mean, honestly, you can train your teachers, you can train all the staff and whatever, bottom line is the kids are gonna have to cooperate
And we need
to
parents,
some degree.
we need parents to,
Because if they don't, it will be a nightmare.
Right.
Little
that's why we
one.
need parents
Yeah,
to.
I
to
just
be
want us
so
to be proactive, that I
Let's
don't
just
want
get back to school.
people taking advantage, you know, of, oh, well, I got a fever, you know, cause I don't wanna come to work for the next, you know, few days.
I think
And so,
everybody's
because
gonna want
subs are going, well, the cost to the district in that sense, because as we're reducing staff, we're not gonna have coverage like we've had in the past. So I think it's just that conversation of expectation that we need you to be here when we need you to be here. But we also are considerate that if you're truly sick, that you stay home, you know, but absenteeism is one of the biggest things that also impacts the district's budget. You know, because if we started analyzing how many certificators are out, how many classified are out, and what that costs the district, it's a lot.
Did you say 700,000 for subs last year?
Over 1 million district.
Over 1 million if you cloud everybody, yeah. Big cost.
Over 1 million. Thank you.
Thank you. So, let's try doing this. I'll entertain a motion to open up a public hearing. Somebody has to mention it by the resolution number, and then Diego will do his presentation.
So I'll go ahead and do that, I'll just read. Open up the public hearing related to proposed adoption of resolution number 3319-20 to adopt K-8 ELD materials for the 2021 school year.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're in a public hearing.
All right, I do have an email. As you know, in our last school board meeting, I explained that we have the phone call system, but we also have the email setup, which is an email that gets sent to an address, boardmeeting@hesd.org. And the email says the following: I would like to clarify which levels this resolution addresses. On page 117, resolution number 33 states ELD adoption for K-8. And on the same page, the recommended motion, it states 6 through 8. Also, see page 125, which addresses 14C, and it states 6 through 8. If this adoption is approved, must the district move forward with the purchase of this curricula even when we are in serious financial crisis? Does this curricula have an online component for distance learning at all grade levels? Sincerely, Christy Burchard, Hester Rep. So let me go through the scenarios. So the resolution language on K through 8 ELD materials and 6 through 8 ELD materials is, both of them are correct. In other words, the materials in our intended use are for 6 through 8. And the reason is that when we transition children into our middle school programs, the English middle school adoption changes, and we have to provide our middle school ELD teachers, those 6th, 7th, and 8th grade ELD teachers, with a curriculum to be able to teach these children. So the second part of the question was, what levels does it address? In this case, the curriculum will be for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Even though we could theoretically purchase the materials for K through 5, that expense would be extraordinary and is not needed because we already have ELD curriculum for those grade levels. So this is to address a gap in ELD materials, specifically at the 2 schools that have the greatest need for improved ELD instruction. And our Director of Ed Services, who just brought us water a couple of minutes ago, was watching the school board meeting on YouTube, and she's here. I'm gonna, Ms. Calero, I'll invite you to come up and talk for just a couple of minutes. The last part of the question is, if this adoption is approved, must the district move forward with the purchase of this curriculum, even when we are in a serious financial crisis. And it is true that we are in a serious financial crisis. And the answer to that question is we're never per se obligated to purchase the curriculum. But as a board, you all know, we are responsible for providing children with access to learning. And when you have children who attend our middle schools that don't have an ELD curriculum, in other words, the teachers are having the print curriculum offline, there's an equity issue there that needs to be addressed. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Calero, and Carolyn, you can walk us through any, answer any of those questions, or just speak in general about purchasing.
Generally, there is an obvious need for a newcomer through level 3 ELD continuum of not only services, but materials that match the needs of each level of student. So when you look at it, you look at where are the students, where's their language proficiency level? Do we have materials to address all of those proficiency levels in a continuum? And do those materials provide assessments and progress monitoring so that we can keep them moving? And do they meet all the needs of all the students, and are the teachers trained? So who are our students? What materials do we have to meet their needs? And are our teachers trained and equipped with the materials and skills and strategies that are embedded in those standards-based materials? And that was the dominant driving force behind this recommendation. It's not a whole bunch of sections, it's not a whole bunch of teacher materials in comparison to other adoptions, but the need is profound.
This is for newcomers?
It goes newcomers all the way up through level 3.
I see.
There's 6 different levels, and it's based on their reading and motor test.
And does this have a computer, online component?
Digital resources, it's from National Geographic.
How much are we talking?
I'm sorry, I ran in without my mask.
That's okay.
How much are we talking about money-wise,
I'll go get
Thank you.
or do you know?
I don't have the quote yet, I'm waiting on it right now.
So we don't know.
But I can provide that for
Do we know
you.
approximately?
It's 4 teachers. So the teachers' editions would be, and then there's different levels, so
Are they workbooks or textbooks or?
some of them, there's a textbook and there's some consumables. But I'll put together that quote for you. I've just been waiting on the publisher.
Because generally, on an item like this, we kind of have that dollar amount and logistics kind of for us to see, to then make a better informed decision.
I'd like you to just describe the curriculum to me. What is it?
Thank you. I apologize. I just heard ELD in there. The curriculum includes, there are Lexile reading levels, so there's ongoing progress monitoring for reading, all the domains, reading, writing, speaking, listening. Students would be placed at their appropriate level and they would move up and through the curriculum. There are units that are highly engaging and culturally relevant. There are digital components to it. There are consumable pieces to it that the students can engage with. But more and more they're moving digitally.
But what does it teach? I mean, what's the academics behind it?
Oh, English language proficiency levels.
Okay.
So basically, ELD standards now are aligned with the English language arts standards. And so the English language arts, this would be for all students who are English learners. They would be getting English language instruction at their level. to move them to the next level and to the next.
So imagine that you came to the United States as a fifth grader and you knew no English.
Mhm.
And maybe at the end of the fifth grade year, and then you move to the middle schools. So you have very little English, and so this will take you at the beginning levels.
Yeah, but my question is, because I see National Geographic, I
Right,
automatically think of, in my case, National Geographic
Mhm.
magazine, right?
right,
So
right.
that's what I'm trying to get is, what is the underlying,
Well, they've really branched out, and they have high interest stories.
okay.
And highly engaging graphics and photos, but they're a textbook. Cengage is the actual publishing company, and they're a textbook for English language development. The concern right now with our current status is students take ELD over and over and over again, and they've been in the same materials for 3 years they're at the middle school. So we need a continuum of materials that matches their movement. We also need to hold ourselves and the students accountable to growth.
Right.
So there's assessments embedded inside, and if a student is accelerating, we can move them up or move them out right away. Another thing is, this will help us with appropriate placement. You know, I think kids are placed sometimes and
Could,
we need to know right away where they
could we
belong.
maybe, I hate talking about something when I don't know the cost, and is it possible to have the materials that we could look over at least?
Absolutely.
Or maybe have whoever you wanna talk to make a presentation on it, it'd be a lot easier. There's a lot of questions I have that there's no way you can answer, right? I'd rather, I have to see this stuff in front of me.
Well, I think, I know from, my last year in teaching, that we have a big need for ELD materials in the middle school.
I know, but I'd
And
like to know what I'm getting.
I
Okay.
understand, I just know that Kathy was getting children in her class that spoke zero English.
And the worst part about it is, they have a fifth grade education in Spanish. And then it's not, that's where these, and that's why I wanna look at them, that's where these make a big difference, because it's not like they don't have high interest in certain subjects, it's just they just can't read it in English. And to me, that's what these programs are really.
I think that, I think you're also on a time crunch. Can this be brought back in our 2 weeks so that we can bring this back in the 2 weeks, and then will you have enough time to order and be prepared for school?
I would just love to see what I'm.
And
I
it is on
agree,
our,
Steve.
it is an agenda item 14C, so, because right now this is just our public hearing.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
In a couple of minutes, it'll circle back around, and one of the board members is free to make a motion to table the item until,
Gotcha.
until we receive copies of the curriculum and so on and so forth. And we're in good shape in terms of having the materials for this artist.
Okay, good.
Pretty much I've been pressing on the publisher, they were supposed to get me the numbers today, but I do have the TEs on the way. So
Okay.
we should be able to see, we'll be in good shape to get you what you need. Thank you for your understanding.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, is there any more part of the public hearing?
We need a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Thank you.
opposed? Alright, closed it at 8:16. Alright, action items.
14A is approval of resolution number 31:19-20 to support applications for eligibility determination and funding authorization to sign applications and associated documents. This is a resolution that will allow myself and the Director of Facilities, Aaron Bezzetta, to apply for all programs, including but not limited to modernization, new construction, financial hardship, facility hardship, seismic, joint use, overcrowding relief grant, career technical education, charter school, and any other state or federal facility funding programs. A year and a half ago, it would have been Superintendent Andrews and John Talia, and now there are two other people in this position, and so we need a resolution to allow us to be the signatories for these funds as they become available to us, and that's what this resolution is for.
And we're delegating our authority.
That's right.
So, well, we'll do this the right way. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I make a motion to approve resolution 19-20, support of the applications for eligibility, determination, and funding authorization to sign applications and associated documents.
Second. Go ahead.
Carla, seconded it. So, any discussion?
Let me just make that clear in my mind. It seems to me like what you're really asking for here is the ability to sign these documents that you don't have now.
That's right.
I don't know who else would sign them.
Well, the people that would sign them don't work here anymore.
That's my
So
point,
nobody-
so I don't
So it's
know
an update,
what else.
Well,
it's necessary.
It's not- I don't know what else to say.
I think it goes back to echo that technically, again, every school district's under the control of the school board. Absent us delegating it, we would all have to sign every
Yeah,
single
that-
application.
No, thank you, yeah.
Is there any other discussion? We'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0.
Item 14B is approval of resolution number 3219-20, reserving the right to make 2021 employee compensation reductions. And I want to take the school board through this particular resolution, whereas the district and all districts in the state of California have been notified of a very likely substantial reduction in funding as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas the board would desire to have the right, subject to any applicable negotiation requirements, unless authorized to act based upon business necessity to reduce compensation for both represented and non-represented employees for the 2021 school year. Specifically, the board must present collective bargaining contract proposals to the certificated and classified unit representative, which may have the effect of reducing employee compensation beginning with the 2021 school year and thereafter, as well as it is determined that it is appropriate to inform all employees of the board's decision to negotiate possible 2020-2021 compensation reductions that may affect represented employees, and to inform non-represented employees of possible compensation reductions. Specifically, that the district work year compensation and benefits of the fiscal year remain indefinite, that all salary schedules and other respective daily rates of pay are declared indefinite for the 2021 school year, that work schedules, work calendars, and other compensation elements, e.g. health and welfare benefits, are also declared indefinite for the 2021 fiscal year, that the board's designees are directed to provide notice to the certificated and classified unit representatives prior to June 30th that the district has publicly opened negotiations with these exclusive representatives regarding possible 2020 to 2021 compensation reductions, and is considering compensation reductions for all non-represented employees of the district, as well as the board's designees are directed to notify all administrative, supervisory, and confidential employees of the indefinite nature of the 2020 to 2021 work year compensation, benefits, and the possibility that significant adjustments may be made with respect to work year compensation and benefits and other cost containment matters. On page 123, items A through G specifically spell out the potential impacts, which include a freeze to step and column and longevity salary increases, a reduction in bargaining unit member and non-bargaining unit member employee workdays, a reduction to any or all district salary schedules, a reduction to certificated and classified stipend schedules, any combination of compensation reductions, imposition of new or increased employee contributions toward health benefit premiums paid through monthly payroll deductions, and or a freeze of reduction in district health benefits, and the right to propose other cost-saving compensation reductions as needed, depending on future budget developments. I will say that to this point, we have all been given the guidance to expect a 7.92 reduction in the district's budget, which could also be considered an effective 10% reduction, as the governor stated in his budget proposal. And the current language for 21-22, or in other words, a year from now, is to expect an additional compounding 7.92% reduction. But it could be more, and substantially more than 7.92% if the state's budget goes further downward as a result of a closure that may happen with a subsequent shelter-in-place decision that may have to be made in the winter time. So with that, I'll open it up for the school board to discuss and ask any questions about resolution number 32/19-20.
Well, basically, this looks like to me, giving you the authority to, if need be, not necessarily, if need be, you can do any one of these things, is that correct?
Well, to
We would
negotiate.
bargain.
To negotiate, like that.
Negotiate.
To negotiate and bargain every one of those inputs.
Okay, so this is just basically giving you authority to do that.
Well, Stu, doesn't it, because we're already under contract, right?
Mhm.
So doesn't this say the termination date of the old contract can be revised, so, or opening it up again, right?
Mhm.
Okay, that's, I just,
Yeah, yeah. I'm just making, clarifying, it seems to me like essentially this is giving you the authority to start negotiations as needed.
Well, he has to follow the terms of the EERA,
Well,
which
that's
has to sunshine and
No,
to
that,
make, yeah,
that I agree, but
right,
essentially it's nothing more than that.
that's right,
It's the first step of working through the process.
right.
Right.
And just, cause I don't know what she did, I don't know that terminology, but just to take the,
It's the law that gave teachers the right to
To
negotiate.
negotiate or,
and also, in case, I always ask these questions in case there's other people who don't know this stuff too. But just so that we know, then you would open up, you would start negotiating potential cuts, which you're gonna do, it's not a surprise to anyone. And you've already talked to our union leaders that this is coming. So then you would just follow the process in negotiations. And then is there like a timeline of how long that would last, and then would that come back here and then they would vote and?
Yes,
Kind
so the first step in the timeline is the budget adoption or expected budget adoption on June 15th. Once we have that adopted budget, the school district can be prepared to come to the board at the end of June with a plan of how to, because we'll have 8 whole days between adoption and the next school board meeting, to explain to the board the recommended actions that we will need to take. But between now and June 23rd, this resolution gives us the ability to start that process, to go through that process. Once either bargaining unit comes to an agreement with the school district on any proposed reductions, there's a process for each bargaining unit to have their agreement ratified by their membership.
And one more question, could they, I'm assuming they could they like just not maybe use some of these alternatives and offer their own?
that's part of the negotiating part.
Yeah,
too.
cause I'm just wondering, like, then why would you put like ideas if it could be anything, right? Just
Technically, it could be anything, but this is, to
just a
me,
guideline,
this is being honest with everybody.
Like this or
This
what
is
he's
what,
thinking.
yeah, this is your possibilities.
Okay.
We don't know, these are all possibilities here, and we want you to know ahead of time
Got it,
that these might happen,
got it.
or we might try to negotiate these.
See, my question, and just doing negotiations for the last 15 plus years, I know the board gives, you know, the district's negotiators the flexibility to do what they need to do, right? But it's still the decision of the board as to what we feel is equitable and just across the board. So that,
He would
so-
start with us. He would start with us first when I say that,
right,
before he went to the
well, because
negotiation.
when you're negotiating, teachers are, you know, and classified sometimes negotiate different things. But when it comes to, you know, across the board uniformity, you know, if we gave somebody a raise of 2%, everybody would get that 2% across the board. If we're gonna agree that we're gonna cut and, you know, down, that everybody agrees to the
Across the
5% across the board. Because you could do, in all reality, a variation of things with different groups, you know?
I would
He
say,
would have the flexibility to
That's
do
right,
that,
that would
and
be-
so as it, you know, in conversations, because we don't know what some groups have you know, power to sell to their members
Or what
and
they
some that don't. But, you know, what I wanna see is for us, and I know he's 100% on board, is it being something we all contribute the same to get us through what we need to get through.
equitable.
So,
To me, this just allows him to be flexible.
it is, I mean, it's just,
That's what it's all about. It's
but just so that people that are watching are not
Yeah.
getting, thinking, oh, well, he's gonna be able to just do whatever he
Right.
wants.
Right.
You know, in this
I-
situation, and that's really unsettling as a classified individual who does this on the other side of the table.
Well, that's
Because,
why I made a big deal that this has to be sunshine,
Right.
it
and,
has to be
See,
negotiated
in
in
the
terms of
past,
the
especially
ERA.
from our experience in the past, and this goes back quite a while. In the past, you'll have superintendents will just all of a sudden spring it on you.
Yeah.
And it's the worst thing in the world you can do to any type of negotiator. Just spring something on people by putting them and saying, look, these are possibilities. I'm not
Right.
saying I'm going to do this.
Maybe not all
But
of
these
them.
are things that we are thinking about if we have to.
but that's, you know, and that's the
Which we
thing that I respect so much about our superintendent is that not just are we publicly putting it out there now, that this is where we're all looking at this equitably, as hard as it's gonna be, but we wanna do it together. And with as many people that we can keep together moving this forward.
We're not excluding anybody.
And exactly, and it's not starting from the bottom, going up.
No,
And the first cuts came from the district office.
from
You
the
know,
top.
And so all of these things, I think you know, sharing and keeping it in perspective because we see things through different lenses from our own past experiences and kind of come to our own conclusions. And I don't want, you know, for our staff to think of that as we're doing this and talking about these things, because they're major. For a lot of people, especially for classified that don't make a lot of money, when you're seeing these things, you're like, oh gosh, you know, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pay my rent.
Yeah, even continue.
I don't know
working.
if I'm gonna,
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly, or pay childcare, or, you know,
It's hard on everybody.
so it's just,
hard on everybody.
but it's looking at things through, and the thing is, we're talking 1 year. Right now, it's just the 2021. You know, we're not thinking about doing this for, let's just talk about next year and let's see where that, you know, takes us and then where we need to go for the following year. But I think as critical as this is, I think not running, you know, and doing hastily things until we need to as well, really being
Well, we're not
considerate.
getting chicken little and the sky is falling.
Right, and being being very just considerate of everything
And it's
that
not
we need to do.
layoffs, right? There's no potential language of, or is that also,
It's all possible.
It's all possible.
It's all, it's
I guess
anything.
I didn't read that part, but.
Yeah, it's all possible, but it doesn't have to be.
Everything's on the table.
To me, it makes you very flexible, but we're in a very flexible time. I mean, we don't know what's gonna happen in 3 or 4 months, or 6 months.
We don't know.
But it allows us to be flexible. It could get worse, it could stay the same, it could get better, we don't know. This way, at least we have a plan for no matter what happens.
right?
Instead of reacting to things, we're being more proactive, I think.
Yeah.
That's the beauty, I love this agenda tonight, by the way.
And it's just the financial terms of their contract, is that correct? Yeah.
That's correct.
I make a motion, that we approve, resolution 32/19/20, reserving the right to make 2020 to 2021 employee compensation reduction.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? 5-0.
So item 14C is the item pertaining to the adoption of ELD materials, and based on the board's discussion during the public hearing, I recommend that a school board member make a motion to table this item until we have a presentation with the materials themselves for the board and an expected cost for the materials.
I can make that since it was.
Can you,
I move that we table this until, this, resolution, which is, number 33/19-20, until we've had a chance to have a presentation by, I don't recall the name.
Caroline Clare.
Oh,
Ms.
okay.
Colon,
do you wanna do it for a specific meeting, or do you just wanna say for a future meeting?
Is it
to be
something
brought
else?
back
We just,
at a future meeting,
We can just make it for the next board meeting then?
just to be brought back.
Yeah, just be brought back, or whatever most convenient then. Okay.
I second it.
Any, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0.
Item 14D is approval of resolution number 34/19-20 to allow the Ulster School District of the County of San Benito, State of California, requesting fund transfer under Article 16, Section 6 of the state constitution. And what this item pertains to is the current proposed state budget includes major reductions for K-12 districts. And this particular resolution indicates that the district is expecting reduced funding and something called funding deferrals in 2020-2021. And as such, the district may not have sufficient funds on hand to provide for the operation of the district during the 2020-2021 fiscal year. So under Article 16 of Section 6 of the state constitution, it authorizes a temporary transfer of funds in the custody of the county treasurer upon approval of the board of supervisors. So what this pertains to is the very real and expected possibility that our district's April 2021 funds will be deferred, in addition to the May 2021 and the June 2021 funds. So that is basically what it sounds like. We will not receive those funds and we will not get them until July of 2021. So if that were to take place, and we expect it very much so to take place, then we need the ability to temporarily have this fund transfer in order to meet our payroll.
So this is-
Open for questions.
This is transferring, funds from one category to another,
This
is
is,
that what you're saying?
this is a transfer from the county.
Borrowing.
This is a borrowing of funds
For
from the
next
county
year,
for April of 2021, May of 2021, and June of 2021.
Because you said the state could say, I'm not giving you your money until
The state has told us that they won't.
Crazy.
No, but
They've done it
because they
before.
still had to
This is
pass.
what we lived in,
Yeah.
and
So what do you think?
So they're not gonna pay their bills.
9, 10,
The
10,
best,
11.
the best way to explain it, Carmen, to all of the
Yeah.
the stakeholders watching the board meeting and listening to the board meeting is, we all in education get paid once a month, at the end of the month. It would mean that you were not getting your April pay, or your May pay, or your June pay. You will get it, but you won't get it until July.
Wow.
So what that does to you is, you obviously, if I tell you that now, what would you do? Well, you'd start putting money away, you'd start making reductions, you'd start tightening your belt. And that's fundamentally what the budget proposal is saying is, be prepared 11 months from now to not receive your, in effect, your monthly pay, your funds.
Wow.
You won't get them until 3 months later.
So when we borrow this money, is there an interest rate that?
That's
we
what I was
charge?
wondering.
The funds themselves, because they're within the county treasury, my understanding is we don't pay,
So we just have to repay when the money
we have
comes
to
in from the
repay when the
state?
money returns.
And the county will have the funds
The counties
Well, the
expected
others
to have the funds.
for all of the schools in this
That's
county?
what we're,
That's
Wow.
what we're told.
I can tell you that the county board of education recommended strongly that we all pass this resolution. So the resolution before the board tonight has been shared with every other district in the county. Whether those districts elect to do this, that's their prerogative to do so. The analysis from the county office is that the Hollister School District is in somewhat of a strong position to not have to use this, because we have substantial school modernization funds that are available to us through Rancho Santana School, as well as through developer fees. So we have some flexibilities that other school districts don't have. And we were encouraged to pass this resolution because you really just don't know what's gonna happen a year
fail-safe.
from now.
Yeah.
So as a fail-safe.
Okay, if, some form of the HEROES Act gets passed by the Senate,
Mhm.
and the schools do get some money from the feds, this then might make this, something that we don't have to deal with either, correct?
That's right.
Okay,
It's all dependent, but it
It
all
doesn't
depends
hurt
on
to have it in
the
place.
size of it and then
right,
how it actually gets apportioned.
to get down to us.
Yeah.
And one of the proposals that is currently being heatedly debated at the state level is, there is some additional funding for schools for next year,
Right,
but it's currently being allocated based on, in the governor's proposal, based on being what's called a district-wide supplemental concentration district, meaning that 55% or more of your students are free and reduced lunch. If that went into effect, we in the Hollister school districts would be great beneficiaries,
right,
because we're above 55%. Every other district that's below would lose out substantially, so it means they would get none of those additional funds, and those additional funds would be split between all the districts that have the higher percentage. Now,
Which I'm sure are a bunch.
will that actually happen in 3 weeks? It's like a 50-50, nobody's sure.
People are lobbying, I'm sure.
Both sides are. The big districts with the high percentages, they're throwing all their support behind them. But you do have a lot of other districts that are not, that also have a lot of political influence that are,
Right.
so
We don't know.
we'll find out in a couple
What
of
is that called to look out for it? Right.
let me
We don't
look it
know?
up for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do it.
So Mr. Tess will let you know what it happens.
That's right.
Diego, I don't know how we can pass this without seeing the cash analysis that, you and I have discussed and then Liz and I have discussed. And even this resolution itself says, hey, you have the cash flow to support it because of, here's the projections attached, but they're not attached.
Okay.
So my question is this something else we can put on, because I'm confused on one level where you say, hey, we're in fine shape. because we have all this cash, but that cash is actually restricted because it's developer fees in building capital funds, so it's sort of like saying, I might have zero money in my checking account, but I have it in my IRA account, but I can't pull it out of my IRA account, because it's restricted and I'll get taxed on, all this other stuff, so I really can't touch it. So,
But you can take it out.
what's that?
You can take it out, you'll just have to pay taxes.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this is even more, because I understand that the county might have, again, we'll just say $10 million in developer fees. But don't we have to use that for the things that developer fees are intended for?
Well, the next resolution that you'll
I was
be
gonna say.
considering is,
Take care of that.
it's called an interfund borrowing. So there's,
Which,
what you just mentioned, there are two things that run together.
Well, can I say something here first before we go to this?
Sure.
On this one, for me, this is something that's gonna happen, next April, May, and June. And all we're saying in this resolution is that which is a huge if we need to do this, we've signed a resolution that we can. That's all this is saying. It's not affecting us now. It is talking about next April. So we're giving us an ability to have a choice. If we don't sign it, I think we're taking a choice away. I would rather have a choice. We're not saying we're gonna do it, we're just giving ourselves a choice.
and I think the county superintendent, by introducing it to all the districts in this county, was
It's
smart
giving
in doing
everybody
so.
a choice.
Just so that, and then the county's board of supervisors know too,
Right.
how, they're gonna need to support this endeavor if it comes to fruition, and schools need to access it.
So I look at this as a choice. And what we're saying is that we're gonna give our district another financial choice so that we can guarantee, if it should happen, God forbid, that we need to meet payroll. We're hoping that doesn't happen. But I wanna have a choice. And I wanna make sure that we get people paid. And that's why I think, and why I will vote yes for this. Because I want all the choices that we can have to be able to meet payroll.
If we were to not do this, and the county already said, hey, do this, is there a timeline that you have to submit this for, and then you're out of the money? Is there, like, are they like, we're doing this right now, but we may not?
We've been asked to pass this before June 30th.
Okay.
So we still have our June 23rd school board meeting
Okay.
to bring this item back if that's what the board would recommend.
So, would that be enough time for him to get the documentation to you to look at?
Oh, yeah, because I
But
think,
why do we need to do that I'm kind of feeling like, Jan, if
It's just a
this
waste
is
of time.
something, if it's June 30th, that's like around the corner, what's gonna change our mind? It gives us an option, we're not saying we're gonna take it, we're just giving ourselves an option, right?
That's all this is, and I just think it has nothing to do with cash on hand right now, this is all about choice. It doesn't matter what we have. And to me, this is about giving the district choices. And I think we should, vote on this, and, let's get on. We got a lot of other things we need to deal with, and this to me is something that we just need to get going here.
well, I will be voting against it because it very clearly says that the request is supported by cash flow analysis that is not attached. It says it's attached, but it's not attached. And my nature is when information is missing, there's usually the rest of the story. Maybe there isn't in this case, but, yeah, I'm just a tourist when it comes to these things, because I don't know what I don't know. And by the way, it's not a reflection on you, Diego, because everything that you've gotten with the switch in the chief business officer and then the other personnel issues surrounding that and stuff, plus everything, I get it, but, you know, my vote would be to put it off to our next special meeting.
Is the cash flow from us that you're talking about, or from the county?
No, us.
Us.
It's us, they manage our funds,
Okay, yeah.
and,
So if you see number 2,
Yeah, I see
that's,
it.
that's what
For the
he's,
convenience
but,
and
you know.
schedule of monthly.
No, I mean, knowing our cash flow, it really is important. I mean, that's one of our core, you know, functions. And the state wants to make sure that we do it really well, because school districts are very unique entities.
So let me understand what you're saying, Rob, if I can. So you're saying, like, let's say, if the cash flow was good, you would say, no, we don't wanna do this?
No.
If the cash flow was bad,
Well, actually, you know, because this is on an as-needed basis, and I don't know what the negative ramifications. I have to do some you know, homework on this, but I want to know where our reserve levels are and how close we're actually cutting it. Because we have borrowed money from the county before to make payroll, and I thought there was an interest cost with that. But more importantly, if we're not on top of it, remember the County Office of Education, they're the first tier of oversight. And if they decertify us, there's a whole basket full of bad things that can happen. So it's up to us to make sure that at least on this level, you know, we're never in a position where somebody else is in control of our destiny.
so somebody else would be in control of our destiny with this?
Well, my experience has been anytime anybody's borrowing money, you know, somebody else is controlling your destiny, just in general. I mean, you buy a house, the bank has a lien on it, right? You buy a car on the car note, the bank has a lien on it. And I have been part of entities when I was in banking where we did borrow money from the government, and they had a lien. In fact, they always do. I mean, you can just look at what happened in 2008, 2009, when banks and mortgage companies went out of business. So, you know, again, my vote's gonna be no, because it says that something's attached and it's not attached.
Thanks for explaining. I was trying to
So-
understand.
So I think for me, it just, looking and reading this, is we wouldn't be able to access any money from the county treasurer, the county auditor, until we showed them, you know, that we couldn't make payroll. I'm assuming that part of this resolution is not necessarily right now showing them the anticipated cash flow, because we're still making adjustments to everything, you know, for our budget for next year, including possible reductions needing to, you know, impact next year's budget. But what I'm thinking is that for us to borrow,
You have to show your cash
one of the
flow.
conditions that has to be met
That makes
That's
sense.
right.
for us to access that money
Thank
for
you.
the county is to then show
your
them,
cash flow.
this is our cash
That was
flow
the
at
missing.
this time, and we will not have the means to cover our
That makes sense.
payroll. So at that point in time, we then have to provide to the county treasurer and the auditor what that looks like for them to then be able to, you know,
Then can
so
we
we make
amend
that
that?
request and they would transfer it depending on how much we were asking for. But that's how this is how, to me, it's making sense.
Is that
Is that,
what it
am
is?
I wrong? I'm sorry.
No, you're
That's
not
my
wrong.
understanding.
Then can that just be clarified that way? Or is this the way it's supposed to?
I can't change the resolution tonight, but
That's how I understand it.
That's how I understand it as well.
That
You have to show what you have before you borrow the money.
Right, you have to show the county and, you know, the county treasurer and the county auditor that you can't meet payroll and that you need to access those funds to be able to do so.
Is
But
that how
at
it
that
worked
point in
last
time
time?
is when you would have to
That's what you guys
introduce.
did
is
last time?
that what you guys did last time?
Yeah, well, we would borrow, we would also take trans, the TRAN
Mhm.
loans. And we did quite a few of those year after year to meet the deferral payments.
Yeah.
So we didn't necessarily borrow, you know, we borrowed, but not necessarily from the county, they were transactions. 10 million, you know, et cetera, so yeah, we did do that,
that's
you
a tax
paid it
revenue
back.
anticipation.
right?
Was there interest There was, okay.
On the
That's right.
trans,
On the
there is-
trends.
On the trends, but not necessarily for this.
I don't know about this, it doesn't indicate any,
If and when we needed to implement a tax revenue anticipation note, there is interest at that time.
with those, yeah.
But that's
But
not
with
what
this,
this is.
with this, I don't see that anywhere on there. You know, if there would be interest to any money borrowed from the county treasurer.
I'd like to make a motion to accept resolution 34-1920, which is the district of the county of San Benito, state of California, requesting the fund transfer under Article 26, Section 6 of the state constitution.
Second.
Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Opposed? Any abstentions? 4-1. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a roll call vote.
Okay.
So we'll go from furthest away. Elizabeth Martinez,
Yes,
Carla Torres de Luna,
Yes.
Jan Grist,
Yes.
oops, Steve Kane,
Yes.
yes, and Rob Bernowski, no. Okay, the resolution passes forward.
So that takes us to item 14E, approval of resolution number 3519-20 to authorize temporary borrowing between funds of the Hollister School District. And specifically, tonight's resolution 3519-20 would allow the Hollister School District to direct monies held in any fund or account may be transferred to another fund or account of the district for payment obligations as authorized by Education Code 42603. Taking it to page 131, we have a phone call coming in here. Let me see here.
Call from taxpayer.
Taxpayer. Okay. I'll just give it takes a second for the phone call to come in.
To accept this call, press 1. To reject.
Good evening, taxpayer. This is Superintendent Ochoa. I'm going to read for just another minute here. If you can sit tight here on the phone call for me.
Sure.
All right, thank you. What this is it's specifically allowing the governing board to direct that monies held in any fund or account be temporarily transferred to another fund or account of the district for payment obligations as authorized by Education Code 42603. Whereas actual interfund transfers shall be accounted for as temporary loans between funds and shall not be available for appropriation or be considered income to the borrowing fund or account. Whereas amounts transferred shall be repaid either in the same fiscal year or in the following fiscal year if the transfer takes place within the final 120 calendar days of the fiscal years. So this resolution resolves the following: that the governing board of Hollister School District authorize for fiscal year 2020-2021 temporary transfers between the following funds and authorizes the San Benito County Treasurer to honor warrants drawn on those funds, specifically Fund 250 Capital Facilities Fund. So with that, we do have a caller in. If the board would like, the board can ask questions first, or we can have our caller ask questions. President Bernowski.
So I think traditionally the board speaks.
Yep.
We take public comment, and then we bring it back to the board.
Will do. So caller, if you can just sit tight here on the call, the board will have a few minutes to just talk about the item and ask any questions they have first.
So would this be primary over, we borrow from ourselves first before the last?
Absolutely.
This is more what I'm familiar with in the past.
Absolutely.
And then what happens if it can't be replaced in 120 days? I mean, in theory, the state says, oh, not gonna be July 1st, it's gonna be September 30th. I mean, it doesn't make sense because it's the fiscal year, the state is managing, right?
That's correct, and to my understanding, the district's responsibility to pay within those 120 days, there is no clause that would preclude the district from doing so, and at that point in time, we would need to consider borrowing funds in order to make that 120-day timeline. At the present, the district is expecting to receive, on the April payment, actually not a full deferral, only about 50% deferral. So those 50% of the funds of the April deferred monies would need to be repaid when we receive them in July, and that would be the first payment that would be credited towards that first deferral. And again, the timeline for now is the very furthest is that 90 days, but then it goes 60 days and then 30 days for the deferral. Beyond that, we don't have any other expected deferrals.
So first of all, have we gotten our property taxes from April yet?
No, but we will soon.
Yeah, okay, that's what
We're expecting to get those soon, and that was another reason, President Bernowski, to hold off on giving you that cash flow analysis, because without that number, it would have been a greatly skewed number. So if we don't have any property taxes, well then our cash flow is really low. But when the property tax is factored in, the cash flow changes in the millions, so it's a substantial difference in the district's cash.
What's that?
Did San Benito County extend to July 15th?
They did, but I don't know that actually impacts payments that would be due us. But I'm not sure about that, because I saw an email from the right people that said it's coming. What I wanna know is, what is the gap between, let's say 88 was 100, how much do we get from the county as opposed to due to the posting, and then how much are we waiting for on the state?
Well, the amount of property tax revenue that we're waiting for is a very substantial amount. It's in the millions. So I'll hold off on making the percent comparison because I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we're not talking about a small amount. We're talking about a very substantial amount of funds. What this is gonna allow us to do as a district is gonna allow us to have one step before we have to borrow any funds from an external entity.
So, in looking at this resolution of other districts, they pretty much opened it to everything.
Yep.
And so my question to you is, why just one?
Because of the size of that particular fund in our district, we made a decision to not include other funds because it would be to some extent inaccurate to say that we would borrow, for example, from cafeteria funds or borrow from
Deferred maintenance?
yeah, child development funds or deferred maintenance, because the fund that we're talking about here is so substantial, it will in effect meet our needs.
Oh, okay, good to know.
Any other questions or discussion on the board?
So caller, we do have the school board here. Thank you for calling in, and I hope you were able to hear their comments and questions. At this point, we'll open to you for your comment on this particular item.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
I did hear everyone, thank you. My question or comments are both. As a taxpayer, I voted for bonds that are still in effect, and I'm paying through my property taxes for school improvements, building new schools. I'm not in a position right now to approve of those funds being reallocated to pay salaries, to pay anything else, because they were specified when I voted to pay for one thing, and that was what that bond specified at that time. And in addition to that, I question the ability of this board and anyone to just say that, we're in a position, so we're just gonna move funds back and forth here to pay what we need to pay. When right now, tonight, you're discussing this and there is no visible anything that shows me an accounting of where we stand fiscally. So I'm just wondering where are the numbers?
Great, and I'd like to respond, and then open it to the board. So what tonight's presentation, and thank you for calling in and giving that comment. What tonight's presentation is about creating flexibility for the district to be able to implement a transfer of funds from one account to another. When financial budgets decline by the extraordinary amount that we have been told they will decline next school year, all districts in the state of California have the authority to implement inter-fund borrowing actions such as the one that's presented tonight. So whereas we're cognizant that residents and voters passed the bond and expected those bond funds to be used to accomplish the goals of the bond, we believe very strongly that we will continue to hold true to those agreements, and that we will deliver on the many expected outcomes of those bonds. As far as the district's financial accounting, it would be somewhat inaccurate to provide a financial analysis of the district's finances today in order to use that as justification for this resolution, because what this resolution is saying is it's saying that in the future, months ahead, 6 months ahead, 8 months ahead, 10 months ahead, we may be in a position to need to borrow monies at that time. And again, not because of a budgeting mistake that the district made, but because we're simply not receiving the funds that we are expected to and should be and have for many years receive the funds at the time that we were told we would receive them. Now we're being told by the state, expect deferrals. So tonight's resolution is a resolution that gives us the ability to meet our payroll obligations 11 months from now, knowing that they're gonna withhold the funding that we're due from the state of California.
So if, again, I'd like to know if we're not able to do this today, do we have a due date of when we can ask for this transfer of funds? Or does it have to be a certain period of time?
We're still looking at the same June 30th.
June 30th, everything has to be.
Thank you for your response, Board, and Superintendent Diego. My question still remains, or I guess it's a new question, my apologies. I don't understand the urgency for tonight's vote when we still don't know what the federal government and or our state is going to pass down in terms of funding for public education. It just seems that we might be able to visit this in the future.
Doesn't mean we're gonna use it, it's just.
Can I ask you, our measure M and your measure V, are those funds in the capital facilities fund, or are those something separate?
That's correct.
So they are, so there's no conflict between the language in measure, in those measures for this?
That's correct.
Okay. I would like to point out, I mean, I'm sympathetic to the caller, but even though we passed this resolution, each borrowing still has to be ratified
That's right.
by us, independent of the action.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure, so, we passed it, let's just say we passed this tonight, and it gives him the actual authority to start the process. But to actually do the borrowing, it comes back to us
Okay,
each and every time, that's my understanding of it.
Yes.
And
so it's not like he can go out and now transfer the
Yeah.
funds and.
right, and so I'm personally gonna vote for this because, it's internal to us, and I don't have to worry about any other agency, coming down and being able to, interfere in our operations.
Cause we won't charge ourselves interest.
Well,
And I wanna also say, if I I appreciate the caller too, and understand the concern. And so with what she raised, if we were to borrow from the capital facilities fund, that doesn't mean we're not gonna finish our school or we're just gonna temporarily pull out of my savings account, use it to pay my bill, and then once I get paid by my boss, then I'll put it back in my savings.
That's right.
We all have great intentions, but it wasn't raised for those purposes. Thank you for your time.
My understanding is with any bond monies, we're still obligated to pay back. And you know, that amount, that whatever we borrow from, especially from this account,
Yeah.
has to be given back, you know, to the account and utilized for those intent purposes.
That's right.
So whatever
You still
transfers
have to put
are,
it back.
you've got to put it back, and the intent is still for that purpose and that purpose alone. We
So you
can't,
honor the taxpayer.
yes,
in the same fiscal year or within,
but that is
5
our,
months.
that is our due diligence
Only 5
to ensure that that tracking, you know, or however we want to show, okay, we borrowed from this account, when are we paying it back in? And that should be public, especially on these monies that are taxpayers and specific to bonds. We should publicly put that out
You
there
have to,
and
yeah.
say, you know, we were able to pay back into this account this amount.
Yeah.
You know, whatever is borrowed, we pay back, so that nobody, including the caller, is, you know, assuming that we're not gonna do what we need to do and uphold what we ask to all the taxpayers in this county to, you know, entrust in us to do
Yeah.
what's right by the monies.
yeah, no, I'm voting for this because it's whatever, and again, but wherever, as someone who has worked under financial oversight by an outside entity, you know, as part of what I do, it's a miserable experience. And again, no disrespect to anybody else in this county, but for us to have to say, Mother, may I, to like the County Office of Education because we borrowed money, no, I like controlling our risk.
I think this is a better way to go in the long run,
Well, that was what,
honestly.
a question I have, is this, so you have two options now, Superintendent Ochoa, and you don't have to use both, or do you anticipate having to use, or could you just say, you know what, I'm just gonna stick to my borrowing within myself, and I don't even have to, or are
These
you
are
anticipating
options.
you have to use both?
Like Jan said, these are options.
Yeah, we're just making choices here
These
that
are-
we
This
have.
is what has been
I'm just
used
trying to understand if we need a
before
rule.
you.
Yeah.
In the old days, this is what they did. This is what they did.
We swept
Because
whatever
you
was
don't have to
there.
worry about
Took everything.
interest or
We
anything
swept
else.
whatever was there available and we
Uh,
dumped it all
Just
into
in
the
case.
general fund.
Yeah, the only thing that I think as a board, is that we have to ensure that we can pay our bills. And so, and pay our staff. And so what we have done is we're setting ourselves up with choices, you know, and hopefully the federal government will come
Yeah,
through
we'll have to
and
use
do
any
what
of them.
they should be doing. And we won't even have to even look at this tonight. You know, we can only hope.
Just being proactive, not reactive.
That's right.
You have to, you know, if you ever want to understand what goes on in my mind, school districts are very unique animals, or creatures in the sense that, you know, if the county of San Benito were to go bankrupt, then it goes bankrupt and everybody just has to, you know, deal with it. When the school district goes bankrupt, the state has to take over all its obligations, including the pension obligations. That's why the state will always be the final backstop. We'll always be able to make table. I promise you, the state is not going to absorb.
Ask Oakland School
Yeah,
District.
that's-
They should have gone under a long time ago.
Several times.
Yeah, no.
Well, we can still have discussion, but does somebody want to make a motion that we, pass this?
I move that we approve resolution number 35, 19-20 to authorize temporary borrowing between funds of the Hollister School District.
I'll second.
This is not a roll call vote, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 5-0.
And item 14F is approval of declaration of need for fully qualified educators for the 2020 to 2021 school year. The district must present and request the approval of the attached declaration of need, which allows the district to apply for and the Commission on Teacher Credentialing to issue emergency cross-cultural language and academic development, bilingual cross-cultural language and academic development, resource specialist, or limited term assignments for teachers. I will say that our staffing is 99% complete. We do have a middle school science position available, and we do have a 6th grade teacher position available. One, because of a retirement we learned about last Thursday, and the other is a position that we've been working to fill, but we have filled 16 other positions as a result of the hiring process. So what this declaration does is it gives us the ability to bring on a person in a limited assignment, a limited credential assignment, in the event that we have any further resignations between now and August. So this is another safety valve for us to be able to identify one of our own staff members who says, I'd like to teach in that science position, or I'd like to teach in that 6th grade position, and to allow them on a 1-year basis to have a limited assignment to teach that particular grade. And so
So this would kind of help with the PE thing, or?
it could help with a number of different things, Steve, and that's one of them. What we have estimated is the need for potential 5 for English learner cloud authorization, and 3 for bilingual, and 3 for resource specialist. As I said, the only 2 vacancies we have are middle school science and 1 6th grade teacher position. Other than that, we are staffed.
Awesome. That is, at this time in the year, to just have only 2 vacancies left for
Pretty
teaching
good.
is amazing,
What is it normally?
amazing.
More than that.
In prior years, Carla's been as high as 20 at this time.
Holy.
Easily. That would have probably been somewhere in the ballpark of a normal year, Liz. You've been here longer than I have, but
Yeah.
somewhere between 15, 20
Wow.
at this time would be totally normal.
So it's a big improvement.
Right,
Maybe.
and I mean, but I don't know when certain people put in for their retirement, you know, that we would know with enough time. Like you're saying, next year, it may look like this, and then somebody may just be, you know, thinking, I don't know that I could do that for another year, you know? And even with the reductions,
In light of
And that's
COVID.
where-
in light of the reductions that have come in light, you're going off of, some of us are going off of our 3-year span, you know, and is it better to say, I probably should be retired now? And so, I think those are also great opportunities for us, for the HR, your HR office, to have maybe those conversations with some of our staff, you know, or employees that may fall in that category, so that they're not impacted, and if they could retire this year, that would be probably good for them, you know, in light of what's coming.
And this is the time of year when if we weren't dealing with coronavirus, everybody's decision has already been made. But because we're now dealing with a very severe budget scenario, what Liz just mentioned is absolutely correct. We could have multiple staff members come and say, I was going to stick it out another year,
But
but
now,
I don't want to do that. I don't want my
Is this
last
less
year
money?
of teaching to be this. So I'm going to submit my retirement paperwork, and what this does, it allows us to say, okay, we have an employee with this other credential, so for this 1 year, we're gonna allow that person to be on a limited assignment to take the position of this other employee that recently told us that they're not returning for the following year. So it's a way for us to keep all of our employees in-house and to fill one position with another position.
Makes sense.
One question, the county office of education are the ones that approve or whatever with the credentials. Is this okay with them? Have you run that? Because I hate to do this and then say, nope, you don't qualify, sorry. Because they have the last word on this.
They, as you know, they monitor all of our credentialing, so this is a resolution that we have had before the board every year, multiple, resolutions, and they're aware that we're bringing this forward tonight.
So, let's entertain a motion to approve it.
I'll do that.
Oh, wait, is it?
No.
Is it in the form of a motion?
Yeah, we have to approve it. Yeah, we have to approve it.
Okay, so let's do that.
I'll make a motion that we approve the declaration of need for fully qualified teachers for 2020 to 2021.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead, Liz.
Second?
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. So board member reports, and I'll start exactly tomorrow. Jan Grist.
I have nothing to report.
Steve King.
I have nothing to report.
Carla Torres de Luna.
Nothing.
No.
Nothing.
The only thing I have to report is I'm still trying to read as much as I can, including what they're doing in other countries. This distance learning thing has the world confounded, and how we're all gonna pay for this has the world confounded. And I think we're gonna have to look at this as a 10-year problem, because by the time our little ones get into high school, we just need to make sure that they have everything that they need. So that's a tough one. That's my announcement. Requests for future agenda items. Trustee Grist.
I've said it a couple of times tonight, but first off, I'm just so impressed with everything that's going on here. But one of the things that I think that we need to have are, we need to have parent meetings about new expectations, new ways that we're gonna be doing things. We've gotta get our parents caught up. We gotta get our parents, like for example, in what it should be like when we're doing the distant learning. What should be in the background? Should TVs be on? Should someone be on the phone? Should the child, should a parent be around?
Should the child be dressed for school?
Should the child be dressed? That's a good one. Eating, the drinking, that kind of stuff. So appropriateness of that. Because the parents don't know. And when you've got a class of 30, you can't point out to, Frank, if the parents understand the expectations, they'll make sure that they'll understand. So that we have to help the parents. It's not fair if we don't. It's not fair. So part of parent expectations, I think somehow or another parents are gonna have to meet teachers. We have to get that part of the gig. And I don't know how, maybe teachers meet the kids before, so that they're not like this, so that they know what their teacher looks like, and they're not covered in a mask, you know what I mean? These are kind of things that I've been thinking about.
Especially the little ones.
Yeah, for the emotional and the social part of it, especially when you got the little guys, because that's so important. I think that the parents need to talk to their kids about the hugging and the stuff that happens normally, but we just gonna have to do this kind of a thing for a hug. There has to be some communication
So how do you
we
couch
need
that?
to do.
Couch that so he can come up with the agenda item.
So I guess it's the emotional,
Parent workshop,
social.
parent orientations?
Yeah,
Well,
expectation.
that's what, he needs a word, he needs the word parent orientation, what do you want?
Yes, parent orientation about the emotional, about the learning environment, about the emotional,
About the new way of learning.
yeah, new way of
Parent
learning.
orientation, the new parent.
Right, what the teacher looks like without a mask.
Yeah, do you understand?
I think you got it.
All right, what else, Gina?
I think that's it. That's enough.
I'm good.
Steve?
I do, and that was, I know I can't talk about what I wanted to ask, so I'm gonna put it in a form of next future agenda items. I'm curious as to the funding or the money we're paying for after-school programs and where that money's going and why we're paying and, just kind of looking at those contracts, especially in light of everything.
Good question.
Liz?
For me, I'm not sure if I missed it, but we generally, at the end of the year, do our the employee of the year for classified and certificated. I don't know if we still did that this year and people were selected. But, trying to keep some normalcy to what we can control. But I think recognizing individuals, I know we're still working, at the high school trying to do that, because I think it's still important to recognize, our employees who go above and beyond, and so many have stepped up to the plate, this year, especially in these circumstances, but I don't know if that was still gonna happen. Either doing it, for a public or on our school website. Virtual, yeah, doing something for them. And the other one, that I'm concerned about that may at some point impact us as well is our contract with the city for facilities. So, when Lisa Andrew was here, revamped them consolidated them into one. But my concern being with the cuts hitting everybody, we have certain funds that are given to us for the co-op of certain sites. If those funds cease, what does that look like? What kind of impact that's gonna be on us? Because at the end of the day, these are our facilities. And so I wanna make sure that we're prepared and that we're not blindsided by certain demands that may be imposed on us, or requests without the capacity to, we wouldn't have access to anything they own if we weren't paying for it. I don't see that happening. So, I just want us to be ready to, I know Aaron's got a lot on his plate, but these contracts with the city have to be something we need to be ready for.
Anything else, Liz?
No.
Okay. So, I would love that, the cash flow report and the reserves in absolute dollars and as a percentage of, budget that we've talked about. And if it's not too inconvenient, because again, it's what we're supposed to do. We spend money on like Footsteps to Brilliance. And I love hearing that it's going so well, but I really do need to see the supporting documentation behind it that, just to make sure that we're getting all of the kids. And because I already know that the reporting is so robust from that. So, and then, what was my third thing? Oh, and would it be possible for Aaron just to give us, just a quick update, even if it's just 5 minutes long, to, see?
Well, because we had, going back to the facilities, kind of, I know in light of all this, is all of that kind of just stopping, so that we know, what our some of the, because we're not tapping into any other funds, so we're just, what are we gonna be able to manage and do and what is gonna be reserved, yeah.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the
Announcement.
meeting.
I have an announcement.
Oh. Got it out of order, you're right, let's do it.
There is going to be a golf tournament on Friday for the teachers. I hesitated a little bit, I didn't know whether it was a good idea, and I don't know how well publicized it is, but I thought if they wanted to take an opportunity to at least see each other, it is permissible at San Juan Oaks Golf Course. It's set up, I've played 3 or 4 times now, and they follow all the rules.
How many people do they
You can only have 4 on a team, and you have to do the social distancing and things like that, but at least you'd be able to see people at your school. It's Friday, this Friday, I think it starts at like 3:30.
Are you golfing?
I'll be out there, I wouldn't say what I do is golfing.
He's deadly from 50 yards.
From 60 yards, I'm your guy.
Are you gonna attempt?
That's my announcement.
That's cool.
Anybody else? And Steve, why don't we make the motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn this meeting at 9:29.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all.
Alright, let me turn off the live stream here, see if I can get that going, just give me a second.
Yeah.